Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got that energy now. This is take two, but we're here.
We're here. Yes. Feedback from especially one listener, Zach. But I think what we kind of laid off the year for a while. I think we were getting a little year heavy, and now we are on a year diet. And I think we need to get a little bit more back to doing the years again.
It's kind of like how, if you're going through like a carb cutting diet, like I know the South Beach diet, I think it is, you like lay off carbs for a little bit, and then you can slowly incorporate them back into your daily routine. And that's basically what we're doing now. So we'll bring it back. We're bringing it back. Why not?
Yeah, it was yes, and I see your. You see my Elk shirt that. So spoiler. So the Elks merch came like the second we were done recording last week, and I was like, darn it. So, but we did Matt Mangles on jersey. I have this wonderful jersey now. So I opened the shirt because I wanted it on when I talked to Jim and Rod. But I do have the hat, so we'll do an unboxing here in a second. Congratulations on your Golden Knights playoff so far.
Well, it's 1-1 right now against the Montreal Canadiens. So let's I'm hoping they can pull it out in 3 straight games and wrap this up.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be Golden Knights Islanders. So that's what I'm thinking.
What I would do to go to a Las Vegas Golden Knights game in Vegas right now, I would do anything. That would be great.
Dude, I mean, my friend Alma went to one and she said it was a blast. She says she bought tickets for game 7 just in case there is a game 7. I'm hoping there's not a game 7, but you never know. You never really know.
Yeah.
So,
so Paul, did you know that your co-host Reed, that you have been co-hosting with a liar this whole time?
I did not know that. Why are you a liar?
I've gotten a lot of, also we're anti XFL now, right? So that's and we're, even though we spend hours, interviewing presidents of Football Canada and, Dan Barnes, media journalist, we have Steve Simmons coming on today, Canadian Hall of Fame, reporter. Even though we have all these wonderful interviews and all this stuff, we are liars, and the XFL is coming back in February.
And that's news to me. It's probably news to Danny, and probably news to The Rock, and probably news to everybody that works at XFL, because, they don't have anybody hired. So, that's news to all of us.
Yeah, I did post this week that when the XFL announces their news, it's not going to be like the ending of National Treasure when they go in the basement and like every treasure from the history of like all the way back to the Ark of the Covenant and everything is there. They very much I think we will get the slow trickle of news like we did before. Coaches are not hired right now. I'm sorry.
No, there's no one that's hired. No one that's hired. Why is this? No one's hired.
So we have a really good show coming up today. First off, and I tweeted this morning. When I talked with Jim Mullin, we were trying to figure out if the Edmonton team is going to be playing BC, if one of those games worked for us to go up to BC. Jim has promised us a rooftop party at his house on Bowen Island. And so we were trying to figure out, that's not going to work. So I have weddings, everything else. There's 2 games that work for me, which is really all that's important. And I would like you to be able to come. So we'll check our schedules, but vote in the comments. The Stampeders are playing October 16th and then the 12th, both at BC. One of those 2 games, I would like to make the trip up to, and obviously we're going to the Grey Cup. I mean, obviously, but I would like to go to BC and hang out with the BC fans. What say you about that?
I can already tell you which one's going to work better for me.
Okay. Well,
October 16th.
Well, it's still leisure.
In the business that I'm currently in, you know what November means. So October 16th is the one that will work.
That's fine. So I still leave your YouTube comments of which one you want us to do. Really drive that algorithm, but just potentially one of those 2 dates would work. But I would love to do the Edmonton thing or maybe fly to Edmonton, do all that stuff. But this is an easy trip. We can do that, do a weekend, party with Jim and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that would be a good idea for us.
Yeah. Let me look into that October 16th. Why not? Why not?
Border opening, everything else aside.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
A tremendous show today. Not 3.5 hours and 5 guests, but we do have 4 guests. We have Well, it all kind of worked out. So Jim Mullin, this was like a late ad. He was just like tweeting about the schedule. Obviously, the CFL schedule is released. CFL is returning to play. Everyone knows all that stuff. Jim was tweeting about some weird, like, hey, this is kind of weird about the schedule. That's kind of weird about the schedule. I was like, do you want to come on the show for like 10, 15 minutes just to kind of like share your thoughts? And he's like, sure. And so we talked for like 45 minutes. Jim brought up the XFL. Jim brought up USFL. Jim brought up all these things. But Jim did a lot of homework. He challenged you to a bet involving the Mariners and the Yankees. So I hope that you stay tuned for that. Jim was very fiery about the Mariners v. Yankees. And Jim even wore like a special jersey for you. It was a whole thing. Yeah,
I don't hate Mariners though. I don't hate the Mariners. I like and appreciate the Mariners. I don't know why. I know why there's so much hostility, but
yes.
It's one sided. It's just one sided.
But Jim came on. So we do a whole breakdown of the schedule. That's coming up. Jim's got that historical perspective. Jim did homework because he was talking about like pre the interview. Hey, these teams are traveling this many kilometers and it's unfair. And I go, Jim, we need miles. We need miles. We're an American podcast. So Jim did all of the conversions. Jim's great. And then we had set up Rod, friend of the show, Rod Pedersen, to come back on. I thought it was a good spot for Rod because, obviously everyone's positive, CFL media. It's an exciting week. Obviously we're Debbie Downers and we kind of want to know, like, realistically, what are we doing here? So I figured Rod would kind of cut through a lot of that BS. Really tremendous performance from Rod. I thought a really good appearance. We talk a lot about like the negativity that he was surprised about the XFL stuff. Again, Rod brought up the XFL. I was going to talk CFL, but a lot of that stuff, the media, the stuff we're going through with the XFL news. I just thought it was a really like open, honest conversation with Rod. I mean, I know Rod's always like on like we are, but I thought that we got a little behind the curtain. So I thank you very much for Rod.
Cool. And also Steve Simmons coming up, CFL Hall of Famer, Toronto Sun reporter, and Kevin Kugler from the TSL Mega Bowl, the Mega Bowl, and apparently USFL Fox. So he's coming up as well.
Yeah, he gives thoughts about that. Yeah, so we brought him on. Kevin's been doing the announcing for a lot of the spring league games, and he's got lots of thoughts about USFL and Fox and kind of how all that stuff's going to go. So, I mean, we were talking just for anyone that watches any of these spring leagues, I thought great insights from Kevin talking about like the research and prep that they have to do the shows. Cause like, everyone knows like Tom Brady's story. Like nobody knows Willie Yarberry's story, who we're going to talk about in the show. Right. So like Kevin's got to do all that research. And so I just thought that again, if you're a fan of the spring league, any of these, alternative football leagues, I thought that was great. A great preview for the championship game. And then, like I said, lots of USFL talk. Kevin's got lots of thoughts about that.
Many hours later.
Hey, so we record these things in pieces and bits and pieces throughout the week and stuff like that. And we were scheduled to have Steve come on right about 1 p.m. our time on Thursday, right before we produced everything on the show. But I don't know if there was a conflict with Steve's schedule or what happened. Like he maybe got caught on a call too long. Who knows? But Steve wasn't able to drop in. So that's why we're promoting Steve, but we won't be hearing from Steve this week. I hope to have him back next week. Very cool. We're still waiting to, I guess the C-218 bill is still waiting to be read for the third time as we start to record this. So I don't know. Do they need to read it a third time? Is that?
Yeah. So it's got to go through a third reading. Then it's got to go back to the House. We're talking with Steve today. I've already got a guest lined up for next week. We're acting like it's going to pass. Like everyone I've talked to, Pat Steinberg, Rod, everyone, we all think it's going to pass. So we are just operating under that. But anyway, so we're not going to have like the latest, whatever, it went back to the House. But yes, we're going to talk with Steve all about that. Steve's got some hot takes about the CFL single game betting maybe not being as life-saving as people think it's going to be. So I'm curious about that. So anyway, and then two quick things. So don't forget Jousters merch, man, we didn't quite hit 1,500 by the end of the spring league season. We're getting there. We're at like 1,350 or something, but please like and subscribe. A lot of work going into the shows, a lot of interviews and stuff. But when we get 1,500, we still have the Jousters jerseys. And then I have my Edmonton hat before we get into all the stuff. So it's pre-open, but I didn't look at the hat yet. I have my shirt. You like the logo?
I love the logo. It's great. It's sharp. I'm not switching teams though. Sorry.
Oh, this is cool. The logo. I wish the logo maybe was a little bit bigger. I might have to do a hat switch mid podcast. Ooh,
That's nice. Is it fitted or is it?
yeah. It's
Nope,
what.
it's
Well, I thought that was them getting all the fitted hats. I thought was asking a lot for the CFL on the first week of the Edmonton. So we'll get that, but that's a good. I'll put this on here. But anyway, so we got the Edmonton. I would like to get an Edmonton follow back from the football team. I feel like we deserve that.
We'll work on that.
Yeah.
We'll definitely work on that. So let's get into the bulk of the news here. In CFL news, lawyer for Red Blacks is Chris Larson said he's been cleared as a suspect in alleged hate crime. He was considered a suspect, and now his lawyer says he's no longer a suspect, and we're going to get a hold of the CFL and coaches there to explain to them that he's not a person of interest. At most, he may be a witness when they actually arrest the people that do what that did do. This is typed up really poorly.
That's copied and pasted from 3 Down Nation.
Completely believe you. From 3 Down Nation, huh? Okay. I guess he might be a witness when they actually arrest the people that did the hate crime. Interesting.
Yeah, I just thought that was important. I mean, we obviously led last week with that, talking about it. I mean, we didn't like slander anybody, but it's always interesting to me that when someone does something terrible or allegedly does something terrible, it's like wildfire, right? And then it was very hard. I didn't see, nearly as much, hey, this guy might not have actually done anything. He might, witness, and that's all scary. And I'm sure that was a scary situation. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure we led the show at that and got out. I like my hat. It looks good.
It does look good. Very sharp. I mean, I'm impartial to the fitted hats because the adjustable ones break my head out more than my face is already broken out because I've been in the heat for 2 weeks working. But eventually, I'm sure that other teams will catch up with their merchandise because I'm still checking for Argonauts merchandise all the time, and I'm hoping that they open the floodgates on that. Speaking of moving forward with everything CFL, the Board of Governors voted in favor of a 14-game season, which wasn't to be what was expected. I guess the public really didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, and all 9 teams signed on for a season. That's interesting.
Yeah, and the thought process is, whatever the public facing needed to be unanimous, right? Even if Montreal or Toronto or whoever, even if these people maybe weren't 100% on board, it needed to have a public facing, like, this is what we're going to do. And I have an interesting quote, Farhan Lalji, coming up here about the vote. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's good. People are thrilled. We've got the schedule. We talk about all that stuff, but this is what needed to happen. And Rod talks about that too, that, this really, like, what do you at least have to try now for August 5th. Whether we're going to get everything going by then, I don't know, but, and Rod doesn't know, but, Jim's very bullish and people are this is a good week for the CFL. I
mean, and to that point, like, we're always talking about how the virus pretty much dictates how this is going to roll out. So that's another thing that happens. Like if it gets to the point where that was weird, if it gets to the point where the virus is kind of going through, I guess it would be considered a 4th wave. It was a 3rd wave, right? That just barely, it's kind of calming down now. If it goes through a 4th wave, then, they're not going to be able to put fans in stands. And if they don't put fans in stands, then, everybody's going to be reconsidering their decision to move forward with a season probably, or maybe delay it. Who knows? That's interesting.
Yeah, a couple statements. Ambrosi, wants to acknowledge the governors for moving forward. He feels like they can't express how grateful they are for the healthcare workers, all that kind of stuff. Obviously really encouraging, the vaccines for fans. And that's going to be a thing too with the CFL players, is the whole vaccine thing, where some of the guys obviously want to do it and some of them don't. And we have a note here coming up about the protocol with the players, but basically so far, and they could change that, but they're going to treat vaccinated and non-vaccinated players the same, right? And ideally, it would get to a point where they're going to vote, before the season. It is interesting that, like, the NFL has already released all their protocols for the season that's coming up, and the CFL has not, and they're obviously kicking off, a month earlier.
And you would think that they'd be able to really dip into the protocols that the NHL has. And and now there's only one Canadian NHL team remaining in the Stanley Cup. So, they can really monitor, they could really do contact tracing with the Montreal Canadiens. But since there's no cross-border participation in the CFL, it should be a lot easier if you just follow the protocols the NHL undertook.
Yeah, the Player Association is really excited. They're moving forward. The one interesting thing is they might change the playoffs. So right now, I think it's 6 teams are going to be in the playoffs. They might expand that to 8, just depending. The schedule is really wonky. And we talk with Jim and there's notes and I've gotten emails from people, Rich sent me a bunch of emails. He's upset. It's really wonky. Some teams are playing each other 4 times. Some teams aren't playing each other at all. Jim gets into a lot of that stuff. And I get that. Right. And what's really interesting about that too is, the playoffs, whatever, but also when we're building this, hey, we're trying to get to single game betting. This really isn't a fair schedule, right? Like, and if you were to expand, have 8 teams and all that. And so it is interesting that we're pushing for single game betting for the CFL at the same time that they have a very uneven schedule this year. And, if you're betting your money on stuff and one team's playing each other 4 times and maybe it's a weaker team than another. Do you get what I'm saying?
That's not very fair. Those odds aren't very fair for sure. Huh.
So they're leaving that open for that. A couple other notes. There's still no formal approval for the fans in the stands, right? So like we're returning to play. We're working on those protocols. That's all expected, but currently there's not. Obviously, they feel confident about that. You see this with the Canadian government. They're trying to really work with, like you said, the NHL with their with the quarantines and everything that they have with that. Which, like we said, all these other leagues now have they've done all the other homework. Like, show us your homework, and the CFL can. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard for them to figure this out.
And I'm curious why the CFL hasn't reached out and actually, figured out exactly, why isn't the CFL reaching out and getting information on how to do this? That's my question.
Yeah, and and maybe they are behind the scenes. Again, we talk about transparency and things we would like to hear. I mean, these are kind of things you could talk about, but they're trying to figure that out. With the reducing the quarantines, getting people back and forth. But it is interesting, this whole players not wanting to quarantine or not wanting to get vaccinated, and then being basically. The idea ideally would be if you're vaccinated, it's like fair game and you can go around. But if you're not, you can't go home on the bye weeks. You can't go visit people when you're in the cities. You can't go do anything. I mean, it's really, not to get political, but a lot of these leagues are really incentivizing and pushing people to get vaccinated.
And not only that, but Canada's now allowing vaccine mixing for second doses. So if you got an AstraZeneca, you can get a Pfizer or a Moderna. So that should help speed up the second doses, because last time we checked, it was 6% of all people in Canada had their second dose. They're not very good numbers when you talk about how Canadian population is smaller compared to the US. 6% of the US population is probably 30% of the Canadian population. So hopefully, I haven't checked. I was going to look that up real quick, but I can't find it readily available. So maybe later on we'll have that information on it. The percentage of Canadians that have had their second dose.
Yeah, again, it is interesting. I was talking with Dorothy about that too. I'm like, it's funny how, that we always use the population thing when it comes to revenue, fans in the stadiums, the viewership, all these things. Right? Okay, Canada is 1/10 the size of the United States. And obviously a lot of that's fair. But then when it comes to the COVID numbers, it's well, look, we also have 50% of first dose, or I'm just making up whatever. It's yeah, but that's a way. That's 1/10 the number. You can't have it all the ways with that. This is fascinating. Farhan Lalji was on, Derek Taylor, friend of the show, his sports cage. He says potentially would some of the teams vote to play, this time for the CFL and then use that as a bargaining chip later, right? Maybe we're still all this XFL stuff is going on, and maybe Toronto's okay, we'll play, but when it comes to this other stuff, then you got to go along with us. I think that is interesting, especially that Farhan brought that up. Farhan and Naylor, obviously they're pushing all this stuff, but I did think that was interesting.
Definitely. Is Naylor going to do any other podcasts besides one? I'm curious.
That's truly remarkable news today. I found out.
I like how they say the twice resurrected XFL. I like that terminology better than the twice failed league that friend throws out there.
That is, well, that's also 3 down. Maybe they're coming out of that. We talk a lot about that. Rod and I are talking a lot about like media hostility and stuff. And he's like, yeah, people have said stuff that they can't take back. I'm like, well, 3 down they've unblocked us. So I feel better about our relations with Dunk and Hodge at this point. This is, this Scott Moe, he's always coming out to Saskatchewan's. Also, like, Saskatchewan, way less populated, way better off with all the vaccine numbers than a lot of the other provinces, but they want full stands. They want, packed to the gills. Their premier, he says, I actually personally think that they will likely be able to fill the stadium. I'm going to go to the opening game, cheer on the greatest football team in this country and likely the world as they embark on the season to return the Grey Cup back to its rightful home here in Regina. It's been in Winnipeg for far too long, an extended period of time, which is really a travesty. I thought that was a tremendous quote.
Wow. The hyperbole in that quote is just incredible. Like the greatest football team in the world. Tampa Bay would like to have a word. They'd just like to have a word. Kansas City would like to have a word. They just have they'd like to have a word.
Hey, real quick, can we get your thoughts on the Madden football cover that was announced today as we're recording?
Oh my gosh. I saw that there people were creating their own Madden football covers, and the ones that people were creating were better than the ones that EA is rolling out.
It's like, it's like, do we need Brady Mahomes again? Like, can we it's like WWE. Like, can we promote anybody else?
Mahomes was on it, not last year, but the year before.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. It's crazy. Anyway, we were talking about this, the COVID stuff. I just have my other note here, but the COVID protocols being released. I'm going to queue up this quote here from Naylor coming up about The Rock. But any other thoughts? Do you think that's as interesting as I do about the players being treated the same, whether they're vaccinated or not?
That's the general CDC recommendations down here in America are that if you are vaccinated, you are treated differently because you are vaccinated. And I know it's an honor system, and it's like, how can you really prove someone's vaccinated without breaking, HIPAA laws or asking, are you vaccinated? It's interesting, but I'm sorry, I do not believe that you should treat vaccinated and unvaccinated players the same. It should be the choice of the vaccinated players, because the unvaccinated people are like, my body, my choice. Well, it should be the choice of the vaccinated players to say, well, I chose to get the vaccine, so I should be treated differently because I played by the rules. I wore my mask and I got vaccinated when I could get vaccinated. So why am I having to, play by the rules of the unvaccinated people? And I understand if you're unvaccinated and you haven't had a chance to get your second dose in Canada, I completely get it. That's not your fault. But if you're choosing not to get your first or second dose, I don't think that vaccinated people should be held to those standards. And I'm sorry that's political, but that's just the way I feel. And I think it's unfortunate for the players that have come up from America and have had their second dose, having to quarantine as much as unvaccinated players. And I understand the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting or spreading coronavirus, but it does a damn good job at doing that. So it's not a for sure thing that, because the efficiency rate is 96% on Pfizer and like 88% on Moderna or something like that. So there is still that little window that you have to be careful on, but by and by, you shouldn't be treated the same as unvaccinated people if they're choosing not to get the vaccine.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I will, like I said, so Jim Mullin and Rod both brought up XFL in our talks, on the show today. And I thought that was interesting because, the CFL is coming back now. It's very much in their minds. I don't think we're going to hear anything at all till after Grey Cup at all. I mean, that's just me. And I have knowledge about the season being played next year. I do not have knowledge about when they're going to announce when the next, because that's the other thing too. We got a lot of comments like, you didn't even know when the UFL was going to be announced. How can we even trust you about the XFL? It's like, okay, well, there's also like varied levels of like sources and information and things that we know we don't know. Like, I don't know when they're going to announce. Like, I have no idea, but I would presume after the Grey Cup. Anyway, Naylor was on this Overdrive podcast. These hosts are great. Hayes, Noodles, and O-Dog are the names of the 3 hosts on this. On Pinty's Overdrive, this Canadian, it's on TSN, whatever. But listen to what Naylor says. Listen to this question, and I want to get your reaction to this. This is about a minute clip, so bear with us.
Paint a picture to you, Nailgun. The border opens up. It's all good. Americans are coming across. Canadians are going the other way. And at some point in, let's say, October, at a Rough Rider Blue Bomber game in Saskatchewan. The Rock is in the house wearing an XFL jacket, and he gets up on the big screen. What kind of reaction do you think he'd get?
It's funny you should bring that up because I was actually thinking of this. As soon as now the season was on, things have been going through my head this afternoon. When's the first time The Rock makes an appearance here?
Right.
Because that's the other storyline that's going to play out here, over the next few months. That story hasn't gone away. Boy, in Winnipeg or Saskatchewan, oh boy, I bet it's more positive than negative, but it would be a good chunk of both. I mean, that is the heartland. That is the traditional, that's where the teams aren't struggling, like where they don't feel like they need to change into something else, and things are good. But I also think there's a lot of people that understand that this league has to adapt, has to grow, has to see beyond its borders. And for the future, they believe in this. So at least they want to see this played out as much as possible. I'm going to say 60-40 positive on the Rock on the big screen at IG Field in Winnipeg.
So 60-40 positive. It is. It's like winter is coming, right? It's like the Rock is Rock the night. Maybe that's our next episode. Like Rock equals Night King ? What do you think the reaction would be if the Rock showed up at a CFL game?
I think it would be a situation like, there are some WWE crowds, like when John Cena's music would hit, they would cheer at first and be like, oh, wait, we're supposed to not like it. We're supposed to not like this. I think it's a very similar situation where they're like, yeah, no, boo that man. I think that's what will happen. I think it's very similar.
But Naylor, these people are still bringing this up, right? I mean, the XFL, Rod and I, he had Charlton Hayes. He's a Argonauts player on his show the other day, railed on the XFL. It was like, I don't even know why why would you ever want to go play with them? It's like, well, because you could get money and jobs and stuff, and there's only so many positions in the world that you can work on the football team. But when I saw that, I tweeted the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark when they open the Ark and everyone's faces melt. That is my prediction of when the Rock shows up at a CFL game.
Very possible. Oh man, that's going to be a meltdown. I just want to pop if that happens. I want to pop on Twitter and just watch it. Like
it's crazy.
Watch the GIF that I always use where the guy looks up at the fire and it's burning. He's smiling. That is what social media would be like if and maybe Reed can throw it in here. That's what social media would be like if The Rock shows up to a CFL game.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Do you want to take bets? Do you think The Rock shows up this season?
I don't think he shows up.
I
don't
do that. Comment on the YouTube video. Does The Rock show up this year? If he does show up, where does he go? Does he go to BC somewhere that's maybe Jim thinks he shows up in BC because BC is a little bit more like
welcoming of Americans.
A little bit more like Hollywood. I can't remember the words he used. Like
Hollywood North. Yeah,
open to new ideas. I don't know.
Hollywood North. I mean, they do a lot of productions out of Vancouver, so maybe that's why they might be more willing to accept a guy like The Rock, who is a massive movie star.
Anyway, but yeah, please leave your comments. Do you think The Rock is going to show up? This is interesting. And Rod was talking about this on the show today too. So from Dan Barnes, I want to get Dan back on the show because I thought Dan was now that we've kind of got the CFL rolling. And there a couple other teams are as well. So the Stampeders and the Elks are trying to do some like inter squad games because there's going to be no preseason at all. And I think like I can't remember. There's a couple other teams like reports coming out, but this was the tweet that I saw from Dan. And it's funny because they're like, okay, there's no preseason games. Okay, well, we're going to do like inter squad games. It's like, well, that's kind of defeats the purpose of doing that. What do you think about the COVID ramifications of trying to do inter squad practices and games?
I mean, it's some kind of practice. I think you need to have some kind of practice. Because if you don't have practice, that's when injuries occur. I mean, we saw it during the NFL season when they didn't have that many. When they went right into the regular season, no preseason games at all, and there were a ton of injuries. And that's something else you're finding out with the NBA right now is that there are a ton of injuries happening at a key moment in the playoffs. Like we're down to the final the Suns have advanced. We're down to the final 7 teams. By the end of next week, we'll have our Western Conference and Eastern Conference finals. And we're talking about how Kawhi Leonard's injured and how Kyrie's injured and James Harden's playing on one leg and how Anthony Davis wasn't able to go during the playoffs, which probably ended up costing the Lakers a title. I mean, there's all these things that go into why the preseason exists and why these things are important to get people in shape. I mean, you can do something in practice, but you're not running game speed. And in the preseason, you run game speed, and that's when you really get up to speed. So I think having full-on game speed scrimmages between teams are a great idea. They're a great idea, just to kind of hopefully alleviate injuries.
The other interesting thing is the competitive advantage of that, where, and Jim talks about this too in the schedule stuff coming up, how, BC is going to have to travel a lot more, right? And they're a lot further away, the Lions traveling in, but who does BC do inter-squad games with? Right? Because they're kind of out, it raises that question, like, dude, the other teams all get buddy and whatever. And, where BC is so much further away from a lot of the other teams, it just does raise that competitive. And also if you have 9 teams and you have 8 teams pair up, is BC, are they the loser at the dance?
They're the odd people out. I mean, I think the Vancouver Canucks had problems too with COVID protocols during the NHL season. So maybe this is just a one season thing for both the Canucks and the Lions not to be up to speed. And maybe it's just a punt season at this point for the BC Lions. Who knows? Yeah.
Just a couple other notes. Retired CFL offensive lineman John Hemister Rice passed away at the age of 37. I saw this floating around a lot. He was a former BC Lions, died at the age of 37. As of publishing this, the 3 Down didn't have an update as to what cause of death was, but he was on like Master Chef Canada and stuff, had his own restaurant. I mean, really sounds like he parlayed his CFL career into a big media presence. And so obviously that's just unfortunate to hear about. So obviously our condolences to his family.
And on moving forward on that, our thoughts with his family. A lot of hate has been directed at Natan Obed's way for speaking out against the former Edmonton football dame. He voiced his opinion and said, it seemed very clear to me that it was a derogatory term, that being the E word, that I, up until now, I didn't really view as derogatory, but, you get new information, you change your opinion. That's what happens. You change your viewpoint. So this has been considered a derogatory term toward people, the Inuit people in Alaska, Northern Canada. Now it's been removed, and people are speaking out against him, saying, yeah, it's probably a good idea that it was removed.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's a mix of that, right? You have a lot of people like me that are excited the Elks, Connor O'Neill, friend of the show, Dave Campbell. But then, he's getting he's getting lambasted now because I think he feels like, it's his fault that they decided to change this, or he was someone that, he's been talking about this since back in 2015. And it is interesting that people are still not letting, as we know, CFL people are very much appreciate their history and lineage and the things that they hold dear, as we know with the XFL-CFL talks, and people still aren't happy about this whole Edmonton thing, but I'm going to rock all my wonderful, this is all awesome and not offensive to anybody,
Well, I mean, the problem is that, like, yes, these things were considered acceptable at one time. It was considered acceptable to rock Chief Wahoo's logo on your hat. I have one hanging on my wall. That I actually wore when I was playing baseball. People thought that was acceptable at one point, but it's a red-faced, smiling Native American. Like, it's not really acceptable when you think about it from like for lack of a better term, a woke lens. And what you find offensive, what you think is not offensive to you, to the person that it offends, they're the ones who decide what's offensive to them. And you can't dictate what's offensive to them because it's their feelings, it's their people. So the hate against him needs to stop about this, because it's clear that he finds that offensive, and he has every right to find it offensive because he is part of the group of people that slur offends.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sorry, your football team isn't more important than the whole, culture and of people. I mean, it's just not. I'm really sorry. I hate to burst your bubble on that one. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Jalen Saunders, he was a Red Blacks player. He was in this scary car accident. Sounds like he obviously isn't going to be coming back this season. They moved him on the retired list. They don't want to obviously release him right now and that whole thing. But obviously our thoughts with him. We talked before about that on the show when he was in that car accident. But obviously he's not going to be playing this season. And I just wanted to give an update about that.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a break, come back. Jim, Rod, Steve, 3 people, all back to back to back just for you. Stay tuned for that.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming on. I told Paul when the schedule came out, I said we needed to talk to the smartest person that we knew about all this stuff. So, of course, immediately we came to you. I'm not even going to try to make a joke about that. And so I saw you, posting a lot of thoughts. I mean, you're an historian of the game and the league and everything else. I guess first off, how are you feeling this week now that everything is going, seemingly smooth?
Well, first off, I'm disappointed, and I'll tell you why. Because I wore my Birmingham Barracudas shirt here just for Paul. I wore it just for him. Like, instead of being the officious Football Canada guy, my polo shirt, I decided to wear this. So, unfortunately, he's missing out. Historically, in terms of what's going on today, I'm just happy we have football back, in terms of amateur football and where we stand in this country. When the CFL does well, we do well with youth football and university football across the board. This is a schedule unlike any other I've seen by a long shot. And I think some of the discussion that we're going to have will have some interesting takes on it, but it's not meant as a criticism. Because we know how much work the people at the CFL office and their teams had to put into this. Coordinating a 9-team schedule is bad enough. Doing it within 14 weeks for a season with 2 bye weeks and a TV network that has already booked certain dates and certain times for other events and blocked those times off, and also working around the hypothetical nature of COVID rollouts with vaccinations. Those are variables that are going to create these quirks in the schedule that are, in some cases, really wacky.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, and that's why I want to get you on and our conversation today, because I'm not like a schedule guy anyway, right? I mean, the NFL stuff comes out, I'm like, okay, Seahawks, what's the kickoff or whatever, but I'm not, so even on the NFL scale, I don't get super amped for like, the schedule drop date like everyone seems to nowadays. And so certainly with the CFL stuff, it's like, we're trying to talk to smarter people than us to really round out this conversation. So you were pointing out some quirks and stuff. And yeah, I did see a lot of, don't be unhappy with this. Just be happy we have a schedule. But, we can still, critique and have questions. What are some questions that arose in your mind?
Well, the first one is quite easily, and it's something that happens when you live on the West Coast, especially the West Coast of Canada, where Vancouver's the only big city, and travel and time zones are always an issue, but I've never seen anything quite like this. With the BC Lions playing Eastern teams 5 times, I want to say, but they play Ottawa in a back-to-back, and back-to-backs at home and homes are notoriously difficult to sweep in this league. Plus, the other 3 times they play Eastern teams are all back east. So all 4 Eastern teams get a home date. With the BC Lions, the team that is the farthest away from them to engage with. I did the math on it, and just for you guys, I converted it back over to miles and imperial. Lions travel about 28,000 miles this year over 7 road games. The Toronto Argonauts, by comparison, 10,563 miles. 2 of those trips are 80 miles return to Hamilton. They're just down the road from them. Let me put this into perspective for you for the Toronto Argonauts, okay? If this was baseball and it was the Angels and the Dodgers, who are Chavez Ravine and Angel Stadium are about the same distance away from each other. If you take a look at the percentage of games, because Toronto and Hamilton are playing each other 4 times this year, in baseball terms, that would translate to the Angels and the Dodgers playing each other 47 times. I mean, that's how kind of out of whack this thing is. Now, with 4 games against each other with the Toronto Argonauts and the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and the same thing applies to the Alouettes and the Ottawa Red Blacks. It's pretty hard to beat a single football team 4 times, no matter how good or how bad they are. So you have to expect that those games are going to level out records somewhat. But if I'm looking across the league right now, I'm pretty happy if I'm the Calgary Stampeders. I've got a balanced schedule with the Eastern teams, 2 at home, 2 on the road. I play 2 at home against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I get my traditional dates against the Edmonton Eskimos. It's a really well-balanced season for them. For the other teams, as you start making your way out from Calgary, not so much. The good news for you, Reed, is that the Edmonton Eskimos play the BC. The Edmonton Elks. I'm wearing Elks gear, and it's an old habit that dies hard. But the Edmonton Elks visit the BC Lions twice, and the Lions don't go to Edmonton. So you got 2 opportunities when the border opens to motor on up from Seattle and see the Elks play.
That might definitely have to happen. We'll have to. I was getting excited about that. I know that Mark Perry, our commander in chief at News Hub, is talking because he's close to Hamilton and going up. So that would be very exciting for that. Yeah, it just seems like, and I know with the CFL we get repeated, right? Teams play each other a lot. You know, we have a longer season, but yeah, it does seem like these. So some teams playing each other 4 times, some teams not playing each other at all. I mean, is it just trying to keep the COVID-y things separate? I mean, is that what's going on here?
Well, in a perfect world, in a 14-game season, I think you'd have 6 of your games as how many? I think there's 6 home and homes and 2 teams that you play 3 times to balance things out. 2 teams that you play once to balance things out. That would be the perfect schedule, but these are asymmetric schedules, and they're based on COVID. The Saskatchewan Roughriders open with 4 at home, 4 straight games at home. The reason for that is because Saskatchewan was obviously the first province that was committed to opening things up and putting fans in the stands. When you look at some of the Eastern teams, they're all starting on the road with at least 2 games in Western Canada. The Toronto Argonauts start in the West. They have a great opener, though. They open with Winnipeg. And the reason why it's such a great opener is that they're playing it at the same time as the Canadian National Exhibition, this agricultural and civic fair that they have every year, which, generally you get into the CNE, you get a ticket to an Argos game. So if the stadium's wide open, there's no reason why they can't draw 20,000 to their home opener against the defending Grey Cup champions. Looking at the COVID effect of this, you've got the Lions in the middle of the season playing 4 straight home games. You've got the Alberta teams hosting teams at the start of this. Quite frankly, when I look at that Saskatchewan schedule, because of their COVID advantage at the front end, they open with 4, and 2 of them are Eastern teams, Hamilton and Ottawa. And they actually have 5 of their first 6 games at home. If they don't start the season 4-2, they're going to be in desperate trouble. In the middle of that 5 out of 6 at home, it's a home and home with Winnipeg. It's a traditional date. It's the Labor Day Classic and the Banjo Bowl. So, outside of that, they should be escaping those first 6 game weeks with a 4-2 record, I would think.
But some of those, right, they're at home, but they're like considered away, right? Some of those games, is that how we're doing that? Because I know that they were trying to, move things around. Am I saying that right?
Yes and no. I mean, you still the Elks and the Lions are a prime example of that. In a perfect world, the Elks and the Lions would be playing 1 game in Vancouver, 1 game in Edmonton. And unfortunately, because of the way things shift around, they just can't do that. And in some cases, in some of these schedules, you have some teams not even facing each other, even though they're playing other teams 4 times in a year. Ottawa is an example of that. They don't play Winnipeg, and it's a real lost opportunity because the former offensive coordinator of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers is now the head coach of the Ottawa Red Blacks, and that would have been compelling to watch, to see those two teams come together. So the other thing too is that there's some anomalies with game days. There's some Tuesday games. There's some Wednesday games. Ottawa in the middle of the season plays a home game on a Wednesday, then a Tuesday. And I have to think that that's based on 2 things. One of them is TV blocking dates that TSN may have or may not have. And the other is that, they run a soccer team out of that facility too. And there may be some conflicting dates. It may be a way to bridge some of the bye weeks that are built into the collective bargaining agreement. But at the end of the day, there's some challenges there, and the Argos don't benefit much for the working man. They should be the working man's team in the GTA. I believe they only have 2 Saturday home dates. And so that's going to hit them as well. If anyone's tried to make their way out of Toronto late day on a Friday, I remember the time where usually it should take you about 45 minutes to get to the airport. It took me 2 hours and 45 minutes to get to the airport, simply because Friday is absolutely gridlocked in that city.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and that was, obviously with the NFL this year, we lived through that too. And we had that one, it ended up being that I think every day of the week ended up having a game when they had all that stuff with the Ravens playing and all that. But it is tough where, right, the CFL doesn't carry. I mean, the NFL can kind of come in and say, this is when we're playing. I think there was that one early Wednesday game that like the dog show or something was going on and everyone was like freaking out. They couldn't believe that the game was at 2 p.m. or something. But I mean, otherwise the NFL can kind of throw its weight around. Where it is interesting though, when you talk about the, obviously, the other things happening in those stadiums and then the TV stuff that's already been scheduled, right? Where, how does TSN handle that? Not really, we didn't really know. I mean, we kind of knew, but we didn't really know until Monday that this was all happening,
Well, the other thing with TSN as well is that, they have core crews that travel around to these towns, and they have to, build them like teams and move them from city to city and have them drop into productions around the country. That level of coordination also demands some time shift as well. There are a lot of moving parts behind the scenes that people may complain about the end result of this schedule, but they can't fully appreciate what goes into it.
Yeah, I mean the logistics of all that. Yeah, I mean I couldn't imagine. I mean it really puts it in perspective. Even these leagues with more teams and what goes into baseball schedules. All these. I mean it's just crazy to think. Trying to even just do 14 weeks with the 9 teams. I mean, but overall, what reactions have you heard? I mean, obviously, I want the thumbnail of this episode to be like Charlie Day and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the conspiracy board, and that's kind of how I view you looking at this league stuff, right? But I mean, what has people? Besides you, I know you've been talking a lot on Twitter. I was working yesterday when all this came down. What is general sentiment across the league?
Well, we're just happy there's football back, like I said at the top of this thing. But there's going to be the inevitable grumbling about the draw, about strength of schedule, about fairness. Now, when I see this schedule, at first I was opposed to the idea of 8 teams making the playoffs. Now that I see how uneven it is, I think 8 teams making the playoffs would have been a good idea here, and to also create some Saturday dates. So, a lot of folks think it's, like I say, wacky. I think there are some people on the coast that are definitely unhappy because as you get into the fall and as you look at some of the dates against Eastern teams, they don't match up well time zone wise. Especially if you're starting games early Saturday morning or before rush hour is over during a weekday. It's not necessarily the best schedule to re-engage fans on the West Coast, quite frankly, even if it's just through television. When it comes to that road schedule, the Lions are going to have a special challenge with those 4 straight games at home too, to sell them and build those up. I think there is, though, the expectation that we'll be back up to full strength here and opening stadiums by about at least the end of the first week of September. And I think people understand the challenges of what the league's gone through just to get to this point. Those who don't understand probably wouldn't be showing up at a CFL game anyway, quite frankly. From my perspective, it does hurt a little bit in terms of covering the college side and the university side of the game, because there's a lot of these games are going to be loaded into Saturdays now. So the Canadians that we watch in the NCAA, we won't get as much coverage of that here. The university side of the game up here probably get buried a little bit by all of this. But you know what? That's a hit you got to take just to get the professional game back on the field, in my opinion.
Ultimately, how do you think league management handled this week with the vote Monday, the schedule release Tuesday? How do you think that all went?
I think it went well. I think it went as well as could be expected. I think they didn't do themselves any favors over these last few months by creating a void in the media in terms of getting timely responses out there and feeding information out that could have directed the story instead of letting people speculate and fill the space. I think it resets things for the Canadian football fan because they're not preoccupied with change. They're just focused on, how do I get out to a game? What games am I going to see? When is it on my television? That's a positive aspect. Whether or not it was really a unanimous vote or not doesn't matter. What they said publicly matters, that it was a unanimous vote. At the end of the day, everybody is playing. Releasing the schedule out the next day was the right thing to do instead of letting another day or two go by, where there would be another pocket of a vacuum. I think under the circumstances, they handled it about as well as one could expect.
Well, there you go. That's about where we're. I mean, I think you of anyone just to expectations and what to look for and everything. I mean, I think if you feel happy about it, if you feel content, I mean, I think it really speaks to kind of that collective, what people were looking for. And I think what people were looking for kind of coming out of this week. So,
well, I think, personally, about 7 years ago, I worked on a project for university football called the Northern 8, where we were getting the top 8 teams out of the 27 teams that play football in Canada, and trying to mesh 4 conference schedules together with a separate competition schedule. And you're working with odd numbers. You're working in different regions, like to work out the variables and permutations of scheduling when you're working with that level of geography and those odd numbers and all of those considerations that feed into it. It makes your synapses bleed at some point, right? It is tough. And so for people to think there's a magic wand here, especially through COVID, to create a magic schedule that makes everybody happy and that is balanced, you're being a fool, quite frankly. I just wish there was room for a 2-game total point series in the playoffs, like they used to have in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, like if you look at the history of this league, when you take a look at some of the scheduling in the past, this is what it reminds me of. Like if you go back and take a look at a schedule in the 1970s, where a Western team would make a stop in Winnipeg and then sweep into Ottawa and Toronto, maybe Hamilton as well, and do 3 games or 4 games in 10 to 12 days. that was the old reality, right? And some of this stuff with some of these midweek games and some of the oddities that we have here remind me of that. But at least player safety is front and center because they are in one way or another working the 2 bye weeks in. And I think that's very important, especially considering there's no exhibition games, and you have to wonder in some pockets about fitness level for these players. It's not a question whether or not they're fit. It's a question whether or not they're game fit and how quickly they can get back into the game and sustain that pace that it demands.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that. Paul and I, we've watched wrestling for years where it's one thing to be in good cardio shape. It's another thing to be in ring shape and go in the ring and be able to do that. I know I saw Dave Campbell was tweeting that I think Edmonton was talking about doing some exhibition, practice-y game kind of things to try to get some of these players up to speed. Because it is. I mean, it's a year and a half off. And if you've been working another job, you don't, you're in shape, but you're not in that game shape.
Well, the one thing that I would have liked to have seen here is shared training camps and controlled scrimmages, but I know the resources just aren't there for it. The other portion that I'd like to see that I think is a real opportunity for some of these CFL teams is an inter-squad game that's webcast and is accessible to everyone. I'd like to see a green and gold game out of Edmonton. I'd like to see a red-white game out of Calgary. We've been waiting for Canadian football for quite some time now, right? So if there's an opportunity to set up a 5 to 7 camera setup, deliver something that is worthy of everybody's eyes, and gives us an opportunity to re-engage with the game again, I hope the teams jump on that opportunity. I know it probably wasn't front of mind as everyone's scrambling to get back, but contract it out. There's plenty of companies out there that'll jump on that opportunity for an affordable price that can manufacture that sort of media for you. If they don't jump on it, I think it's a lost opportunity.
From what I've known in my time, I feel like it will be a lost opportunity. I just to be, not.
I'm just trying to frame it optimistically.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
not realistically, but optimistically.
Yeah, but that's the thing too. Is here we are. I mean, hiring people back now. I mean, we're going. I mean, it is. I know that they had some of the staff there, but we have had some of the staff come back. I just was seeing today that some of the players now are not, are being retired or whatever, aren't playing. I mean, it is now this mad scramble and getting ready for training camps. I mean, do you feel, how do you feel about, I mean, we're going to hit August 5th, but how do you feel this looks in the meantime until we get there?
Well, one of the things that I'm anticipating is imperfection, and imperfection can really loan itself to some pretty crazy, exciting moments in this game. Sometimes when a game is played at its very top high performance level and it is perfection, it can actually get pretty boring. And I think there's going to be some improv throughout the year in terms of juggling player personnel, in terms of dealing with injuries, in terms of some in-game compromising the coaches will have to do that will create opportunities on the field, that will create some wild point swings, that will probably create a couple of nasty blowouts as well. I'm interested to look at this almost from a scientific perspective and see what happens in this lab with a off-center schedule and a start without an exhibition season. I think we'll see just how important an exhibition season is in the first 4 weeks of this regular season. Many people aren't fans of exhibition football, right? Of preseason football. And it does seem to be a bit of a tease that doesn't deliver at the end of the day. That being said, if you're really into watching personnel movements and watching developments and watching battles at positions, it can get quite interesting if you're engaged at that level. And over the years, games 1 and 2, since the CFL went to the 18-game season, always feel like exhibition game 3 and 4. So I think get ready for some sloppy play from time to time, but that can also loan itself to some pretty interesting and exciting moments, oddly enough.
Yeah, it's hard. We're getting ready covering this big spring league championship this weekend. And not that, obviously the CFL, much higher caliber of whatever, but this year with all the protocols, they got those guys in so late, that I think they only really practiced together for like a week before. And it's like just this week, because it's only like a 6-week thing, we're finally getting, really good play weeks like 5 and 6. And, then the season's done. And so, with the CFL, we saw last year with the NFL with injuries. You have both of those sides. So you have the injury, conditioning, whatever, and then you just have players being ready to go. Now, obviously, they have a longer training camp here, getting ready for the CFL. So I hope, but like you said, some of those inter-squad games or whatever could help, kind of ease that out a little bit, right?
Well, when you look at the Toronto Argonauts and all the free agent signings they had this offseason, how are they going to test these guys? How are they going to properly evaluate them? Certainly, they're not going to get them into true game speed. Even if they're playing an inter-squad game, they're not getting them up to true game speed. How do you make a total evaluation on this staff where you've gone heavily into the free agent market? I would think if I'm a player that's cast aside from the Argos, I'm looking for another opportunity somewhere else where I can catch on in a hurry, because there's a lot of talent that's been signed in Toronto that is obviously capable of playing, but can they make the right read on them and within the abbreviated camps that they're going to have? I don't have the answer to that, but that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I don't want to hold you too much today. You've been so gracious with your time. Any other thoughts, quirks, anything before we let you? I'm sure we'll, hopefully, God willing, we'll talk to you again, but anything else today before I let you go?
No, I'm just looking forward to seeing you come up here from Seattle to see the Elks and the Lions play when the stadium's finally wide open at BC Place. You're only 2.5, 3 hours away from Vancouver, where you are. Are you on the north end or the south end of Seattle?
We're West Seattle. Yeah, I just did Portland to Seattle yesterday. I had to go down for a shoot and back. So yeah, that's no problem at all. They'll release, I assume, the single day, right? Single game tickets and all.
Yeah, they'll have single game tickets. At some point, they're gonna open the thing up. I think it's great that we just have football back again. I'm looking forward to see where the XFL talk starts up again in the middle of this season. Now that the CFL have these game platforms on TSN, is that a place where that talk is actually going to advance somewhat in what I would suggest is a controlled environment for both TSN and the CFL? It occurred to me that about 2.5 years ago, New Zealand brought their Maori All Blacks up. It was basically an all Maori New Zealand rugby team. And Jason Momoa did a tour with them through Vancouver, through a number of First Nations reserves, really whipped up two things: awareness of the game, but a great cultural bond between the South Pacific Islanders and the First Nations up here. And it put people in the stands. They had a good 35,000 for that game. I'd like to see what will happen when The Rock shows up on a sideline. I would like to see what happens when the carnival comes to town. I would like to hear maybe some of the speculation, but maybe some of the facts start coming out around this as the season goes along. As much as it's great to have football back, I'd like to see where the rubber hits the road on this, because I do think out of all the possible pairings, whether it's USFL and the XFL or the XFL and the CFL, whatever's on this musical chairs chart right now, the most plausible one is the XFL and the CFL. whether I support it or not. It's still the most plausible one.
I just want the record to show that you were the one that brought up the XFL today, that I did not. So I just,
That's right.
No, I did see the Naylor tweet, or he did some radio something about, if The Rock shows up, and I tweeted at the end of Indiana Jones when they open the Ark of the Covenant and everyone's faces melt off. That's what I imagine if The Rock walks into, the Calgary.
But seriously, like in a town like Vancouver, that is such an event-driven town, there's not a lot of loyalty here for the teams that we have in this town. Not even the Canucks, quite frankly. And we're a town that's comprised like Atlanta, Georgia is. A lot of people come from somewhere else with their loyalties. The locals like me are very few in number. So when a big shiny object like Dwayne Johnson comes into town, it turns into something. It creates energy. It directs eyeballs. Maybe it directs the eyeballs of people with very, very low attention spans, but you do get their attention with it. And I would suggest that if there is a touchdown point for Dwayne Johnson, it ain't in Toronto, it's in Vancouver. It will stir things up out here. Well, if it happens.
Yeah. And I mean, there has certainly been good movement on the Redbird side lately, hiring the individual that helped broker the $110 billion TV deal for the NFL, bringing, the former executive producer of Monday Night Football coming out. There was a lot of questions last we spoke. What does Redbird have to offer to anybody? Well, we're starting to rally the troops, I feel like, on our end. I feel like Redbird looks a little better today than it did the last time you were on the show.
Well, I was joking around a bit online about the USFL stealing the XFL's thunder there. But at the end of the day, what looks more serious to you? Those names lining up in Redbird in at least alignment with the XFL or the Spring League USFL thing where we don't even really know if Brian owns those trademarks or not. like, come on. And the other thing too is that, okay, the USFL has great appeal to me. And you know why? Because I'm an old Gen Xer that watched it in my teens, right? And it was this neat spring football thing. I got a couple of USFL jerseys to go along with this one too. But that was 39 years ago. Like it has. I mean, it's an antique. It has no relevance now, in terms of a brand, in my opinion. Like you're not drawing people in their early to mid 50s out on a regular basis to games if you're going to be a fan-driven league. If you're going to be a gambling-driven league, or if you're going to be a TV show that kind of uses a stadium as a studio, maybe you got a shot with that. But to hear Doug Flutie come out and talk about the great stars of the past of the USFL, that's not happening. That's great. That's ancient history. That's not happening this time around with this function. I actually have far more confidence in the XFL doing something than the USFL does, just based upon that.
Yeah, to me, and we talked to Jim Earhart was on our show last week. To me, if you're gonna go the route of the USFL with the baggage, with the Trumps, with the bankruptcy, with all these things, and then not reach out to a single former anybody about anything except Doug Flutie to come on and do an appearance. I mean, that's what I just don't get, because I would have just make the Spring League bigger or start the Brian Woods Football League. It's like, well, why buy those trademarks and then not talk to anybody involved in that? I will never understand that.
Do you just think that Brian Woods jumped into the pool before the XFL could? Do you think that's just what it was all about? That's the way it reads to me.
It does. And what, I'm as a podcaster in this, I'm fascinated because this is, great for us. And, because lest our listeners know, the XFL is not coming back in 2022. This is a debate we've had on the show, not even a debate, but an argument we've had on the show now. But that's how I read it too. But what I love about everything is like, well, We talked about it last week because like they bought the Tampa Bay Bandits, right? That's one of the trademarks. And they go, I see these guys online. Well, when the XFL comes back to Tampa Bay, I'm like, they couldn't get 9,000 people in Raymond James Stadium. Like, don't tell me that the XFL owns Tampa Bay football, right? I mean, St. Louis, okay, that's one thing, but like LA struggled. I mean, a lot of the markets struggled. That's okay, but that they're invading on the XFL street corner while they're gone. But yes, I definitely read it as jumping in before they could get their ducks in a row. That's how I do, and I'm in the minority with the new sub writers, but that is what I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way it reads to me too. I mean, I'm with you guys in that if there's more opportunities out there for players and coaches to pursue a career in the sport, I'm all for it. And if it creates more competition, it's going to drive the floor up higher for everybody. I mean, you mentioned wrestling. I mean, the golden era of wrestling was really the 90s with, the Monday night battles. And they forced each other to up their games. And when it came down to just one again, when they united under one umbrella, that level of competition, that level of completely disappeared overnight. So, if the Spring League wants to repack the USFL, and if the XFL wants to jump in and try to do something in the spring space, and if the CFL can work with them and continue to be prosperous, I'm all for it because it creates more opportunities for more individuals. I don't know how anybody could be against it, quite frankly. That's just the way I think.
We could go about this forever, but the thing that's been coming out lately in our chats with the USFL is not so much the players and the cities, right? Because I mean, the players are going to be out. But if Brian and them get a good group of coaches that are signed to 2-year deals or non-compete, whatever things, that to me is an issue then when the XFL comes back. And not that there's not a wealth of head coaches too, but if you're trying to get the heavy hitters, I mean, look at, the XFL, the Spring League, I mean, it's all the same. You get Hal Mummy, you get Glanville, you get all these guys. I mean, half the Spring League teams are just retreads of coaches from the XFL, right? Because obviously these people know what they're doing. So that to me is the big concern, is it's not so much the cities and the fans and the players. It is if you get these coaches signed, for a couple of years, and then what do you do?
Well, you got some of the coaches that also transit between the CFL and these American spring leagues as well. Like I'd like to, get GPS trackers on June Jones and Mike Riley to see where they're at today. There's a wider selection of them too, especially assistants and coordinators. So I mean, it's a fluid market. Right. So it behooves these leagues and these operations to be competitive and step up.
My last comment today, you've been so gracious with your time. I blame about 90% of this XFL, CFL animosity and all the fighting and the merge and the rules and everything on June Jones. I really do. Yeah. I place all of the blame on him in that first interview when he came out. And he goes, "The Rock's 4 downs is coming. The Rock's taking over." And even at the time, I tweeted, "Love June." All this history, June neither has the power nor the influence, to really have anything to say about any of this. But because the XFL has never said anything about a merger, rule changes. It's never come out from anything official. It was all based on that June Jones interview. I really do think.
I agree with you 100% on that. And let the speculation begin from him saying that, because June Jones has a background in Canada with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, played briefly with the Argonauts as a quarterback. And so when someone who translates on both sides of the border like that, even if it's just in a local market, but he translates on both sides of the border, says something like that, it puts a group like the CFL or the XFL in a defensive position. And then if they don't defend that, then it opens up the vacuum of speculation, like we were talking about 10 minutes ago. And if you don't address that speculation, well, I mean, I think I think we've seen some collateral damage in terms of some relationships, quite frankly, because there was that space for speculation.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think between certain media members, between certain individuals, I think it's mostly in the media space. I think it allowed some media members who had already a sharpened knife towards the CFL to go at them harder. I think it alienated a lot of the core fans, many of whom will come back because there's a schedule right now, but some who are kind of playing wait and see, especially because we're not 100% safe because of COVID. But also going, well, what's this thing going to look like next year? What's this thing going to be the year after? Are they going to take my game away from me? All those questions are there. They don't go away this week just because we've got a schedule and we got a green light on playing football. Those things are all coming back. That's, like I said, that's one of the things that I'm interested in seeing play out over this coming season is where does the XFL story go? And I brought it up, and you didn't bring it up.
I will say, with media going at each other, 3 Down Nation no longer blocks me on Twitter, so we have at least mended that field. That was a touching point for a while. So now I think we're friendly again because there was some knives there for a little while. So
you guys are good for each other.
Yeah,
seriously, you guys are good. We contrasting ideas are fine. Sometimes when they get a little sharp between parties, you got to take a time out. I understand that. You got to go to different bars for a couple of weeks, right?
Well, thank you so much again. What started as, let's get Jim talking for 10 minutes about the schedule. But I really appreciate it. I know Paul will be sad but you just will have to come back now. So we have an excuse now. And I am holding you to our rooftop party that we were promised. We're going to bring a boat up and party at the house. I've been promised. I told Paul that.
That sounds good. And actually, given where the Yankees are in the standings, and given where the Mariners are in the standings, they're about equal in terms of mediocrity right now. Issue this to Paul. It's $10 American that the Mariners finish with a better record than the Yankees do. Let's see if he takes me up on that.
All right. I will tell him that. Yeah, there's been a lot of fire Aaron Boone tweets lately. I don't know what an Aaron Boone,
noticed that.
I don't know what an Aaron Boone is or why we need to fire him, but yes, that's been good.
Hey, I'm a Mariners fan. I deal with that level of frustration on a regular basis. This is all new to him. If you're a Yankee fan, it's usually blue sky and your ire is only directed towards Red Sox fan. Yeah. Like welcome to the real world, Sanchez.
Thank you so much again. I can't thank you enough. And I really appreciate it and all the insights and bringing in people smarter than us to talk about things that we need to learn about. So,
okay. Thanks for having me on. Anytime, guys.
Thanks.
Support for the Markcast brought to you by Manscaped. They're the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. They're the champions of the world at that. They offer precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their 4th-generation trimmer. That's right, 4.0. It is the Lawnmower 4.0. You can join over 2 million men, including me, Reed, Will Purvis over at Wheelhouse, a bunch of other people, with this special code at manscaped.com. It's Markcast. It gives you 20% off, free shipping. Reed. There's the code right there. Reed's pointing it out. Use that code Markcast, get the 20% off, free shipping. Reed, what do you think about the Lawnmower 4.0?
I think it's great. We talked about this, sung the praises before, the waterproofing, the light. I do it in the shower, keep it clean. You turn the light. It's like an auto light. You don't even need to do anything. I keep the charger. It's just ready to go. I don't know how often you need, maybe you need to shave every day, maybe you really need to clean up, but you just drop it in there and get it and go. My big selling point is use the code Markcast and don't use the code Homer Nation over at 3 Down Nation, that they are also brought to you in part by Manscaped. And so if you like the work that we are doing, then please use the code Markcast at manscaped.com.
And they have a skin-safe technology that basically makes sure you don't nick yourself while you're trimming everything down. And if you're feeling not so safe with going completely clean, you got different guides. You got like sizes 1 through 4. You pop one of those guides on, and it doesn't completely trim you. If you want to be, you want to have some hair, a little bit of hair, a little bit of stubble, and you're worried about getting nicked, you can just put one of those guards on. Put size 1 on. Why not? But if you don't use the guards, then you don't have to worry about getting nicked. Again, gotta say this one more time. It's one of the softest razors you can get on the market, and you get 20% off free shipping right now with the code Markcast at manscaped.com. That's 20% off free shipping at manscaped.com. Use that code Markcast, unlock your confidence, and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
Well, Rod, thank you so much for coming on again. I feel like, I feel like we've grown a lot since you last came on. I feel like you've grown. I spent all day yesterday as we're recording, listening to your show. I had to drive down to Portland. Truly wonderful interview with the Argonauts player, Christian Hughes, right?
Charleston Hughes.
I thought that was phenomenal. I love I getting to know you and Darren and everything else. So thank you so much for coming back on the program.
I was happy that you asked. I'm excited. It's a good show.
Well, this was my thought process. And, this is all going on. It's a big week for the CFL. Obviously, tremendous excitement and everything else. But I felt like you would kind of cut through a little bit of the BS for us, right? And just that you are, straight shooter and know what's going on. And so that was kind of my thought process of bringing you on today. So first off, just how is everything going this week and how are you doing?
Oh, I'm excited that the CFL's back. I'm annoyed that people are asking me for tickets for games. I'm like, I don't do that anymore, guys. So no, the whole country is excited that the CFL is coming back. They've clearly missed it, Reed. I mean, big time.
I did have kind of a philosophical question for you as we kind of got into this. I was thinking, knowing that you were going to come on. So I'm in like the wedding and event industry, right? And the last year and a half has very much mirrored the CFL, right? We were getting ready for summer last year. It sucked. It went away. We have just been dealing with just crap, right, for months with regulations and what's going to happen. And now that we're finally back in weddings, a lot of the vendors I'm talking to are like, we're over it. Like, cause we're getting into the season right now, right? It's our big season here in Seattle. Do you feel like, is the CFL media, are we just ready to go? Has any of this weighed on everybody the last 9 months, 12 months about this?
Oh, yeah, 98% of the CFL media, the guys and girls that their whole job is the CFL. I mean, honestly, Reed, people said some things they probably can't take back over the last year. You've seen a lot of it, right? Like people are on edge. And I'm talking about media people. And it didn't bother me. I mean, some guy came on my show today and said, it's a Blue Bomber reporter, Winnipeg Blue Bomber reporter. He said, thanks for keeping the CFL top of mind for the last year. And I was like, my alarm's going off. Sorry. I was like, listen, man, it was self-preservation. We had to talk about something, right? But we also talked NFL and we talked NHL. We talked about a lot of other things. But I guess my point is, if your sole livelihood is tied to the CFL, I could see why a lot of people were pretty upset over the last year. Now they're back. And they were afraid to say anything, right? Because, you speak out against COVID or speak out against the direction that the CFL owners were taking, you're going to get canceled. You're probably going to lose your job. So I can't understate or I can't overstate, I guess, the excitement that the CFL's back.
Yeah, it kills me. I get, some of the feedback and they're like, well, why are you talking about this week? Or what? It's like, we got to do this every week. Like, you got to go 2 hours every day. It's like, we got to talk about something. It's like you said, self-preservation is it's like, what do you want me to do? I got to fill a show here, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. But, before you started recording here, you talked about what's happened since we last spoke. And I'm stunned at the backlash against the XFL merger. And I think the huge elephant in the room here is two things. One, the finances of the CFL weren't great before. It's a miracle they survived COVID through a variety of reasons. Sponsors stayed with them. The government helped them out, paying their staff. There were some private donors that wrote checks for CFL teams to stay alive. So that's just to get them through this year. But how are they going to come out of this year financially? And then that XFL merger is still looming. It's still looming. And when I say I was surprised at the backlash, I mean, not so surprised from the fans, particularly the longtime fans that just love the CFL with every fiber of their being. But you mentioned the Charleston Hughes interview yesterday. I was stunned that he said, why would we hitch to that? I was just, and he's an American, right? I'm like, Charleston, would you not like to go play for the Philadelphia expansion team in your hometown of the XFL? I think he's from Philly. Like, that stunned me, Reed. And it's not just a casual debate, right? People are like downright angry about this stuff.
Yeah, I never in a million years. And what's so hard for us, and I think we've talked about this before too, is like, the XFL people, we don't have any skin in the game. We're just happy to be invited to the party. And then you get all these CFL people that, like, the whole game is everything to them. And you're like, okay, well, I can't, when we don't want, we are happy with anything and you only want this, it's really hard to have a debate about that. Or
I've noticed, and I've noticed that you don't shy away from it, and you also don't back down. But what's changed since the last time I talked to you is I'm out on arguing or debating anything. And what annoys me a little bit is, like, every single day people are like, Rod, what do you think about this? Rod, what do you think about that? And I'm like, I don't even really want to say anymore because I'm just tired of the arrows coming. Just to give my thoughts, it almost isn't worth it because it's not going to matter what I think or what I say. The CFL owners are going to do what they want to do. But Reed, I guess, we're talking CFL with you today. They were fractured as an ownership of 9 teams, whether they were going to play or not. So they sold the ones that didn't want to play and they got that unanimous vote. That was a major hurdle. But I still think they're fractured on the future of the CFL. A lot want to merge and a lot don't. So they're not out of the storm yet, I guess is my point. But everybody across this country's, people are rushing to buy season tickets and people are popping champagne. CFL's back. Yes, but it's not the CFL. The players have taken major pay cuts. They, one big thing on this new collective bargaining agreement they agreed to last week, an agent told me that incentives, which are huge parts of CFL contracts, are a gray area. He goes, we didn't have time to haggle over how are we going to split these. Like, we play an 18-game schedule in Canada, so they're going to play 14. So they're like, are we splitting 14 18ths of $1,000 bonus? We don't have time. So they ignored that. And I just think that it's going to create disgruntled players, I think, especially when guys hit their bonuses and they don't know if they're going to get paid or not.
Well, and I know, and I remember, I listen to the show most days when I can, and I know you and Darren were talking about that. And that's the thing. It's like, guys, for the NFL players, if Antonio Brown got that extra, okay, $250,000 is a ton of money for anybody, but okay, that's not the end of the world if Antonio Brown doesn't get that final incentive. Or I know that Russell Wilson, I can't remember what one of the Seahawks, they had the same kind of thing that they, he did like 18 lateral passes to him. But for the CFL guys, getting those incentives, huge, right?
It's the difference between paying their rent or not, or buying their kid a pair of shoes. That's the truth, Reed. That's just what it is. So, I don't think people understand that. I talk to the coaches every day. I talk to the players every day. Like, when I left as voice of the Riders, I crossed the floor from being on the owner's side to the players' side. And the players sniffed that out real fast. So, and the coaches and players aren't all in one group either, by the way. I had coaches saying to me, the biggest hurdle here is whether the players will agree to these pay cuts. And I'm like, they'll agree to anything. They've said that. They said last year, we'll play in a bubble. We'll take less money. We'll play less games. We just want to play. And so I said to the coach, I'm shocked. You spend more time with the players than I do. I'm shocked you wouldn't know they will play no matter what. And he goes, well, they tell you things they don't tell us. And I can see that too. That's the truth. But to them amending that CBA, 19 amendments, that's a lot, Reed. They agreed to them all, the players did. And then there was, okay, owners, you now need to vote to play, which they did. But it's just, they're not taking the field real happy. They're happy to play. It's still not a great financial proposition for them, particularly the Americans with the exchange and all of that goes into it.
You mean the players some of the players are taking the field unhappy? Because there's been concern that some of the team owners are taking the field unhappy, right?
Yeah, well, they all are. Nobody likes to lose money. Nobody likes to lose money. They're all going to lose money. And that's why I came into this interview with you today saying I want to be positive about what they've done. I've said it on my show. I'm proud of the owners for doing what's right for the league and for the game and for their players and staff, and not necessarily what's right for them. Nobody likes to lose money. But I think I just want to caution people that it's not all systems go. I think the stadiums, if they can be full, will be full. I don't think there's any doubt. When the Rough Riders kick off at home against the BC Lions on Friday, August 6th, I'd be stunned if there weren't 33,000 people jamming every seat. That's what I'm hearing, right? We'll see if people put their money where their mouth is, but they just can't wait to get back into the stadium. There's a lot of, you don't know what you had till it was gone. People were thinking the league was going to fold. I wouldn't have been shocked if it hadn't. It's a miracle, frankly, that they got through this. So the fans are going to be there, but are they going to make enough money to pay these players? I'm still not sure.
It felt weird to me. And again, they announced the delay. We're going to start in August. They have not said anything. Nothing changed from anything, right? I mean, the league was notoriously quiet, right? Didn't say anything. And so then they did do this big vote on Monday, and, Twitter, everything's crazy. Everyone, the CFL is back, all this. I'm like, but they literally just affirmed what they already said they were going to do. I mean, was this that big of a hurdle to cover, to have all nine? Because I guess last year the teams didn't all vote. I mean, was it that big of a thing that now the CFL is back and it wasn't 2 months ago when they announced this?
Well, it's confusing, and you're confused. I'm confused. Like late last week, you're familiar with Dave Naylor. He's the number one. He's the, I call Dunk the Adam Schefter. Maybe he's the Chris Mortensen of the CFL, Dave Naylor. And Naylor said it's going to be, they're going to vote yes. It's probably going to be unanimous. And I'm like, how would you know that 3 days in advance? How would you know 4 days in advance? But whatever. So when they came out, unanimous vote. Well, Naylor said it was going to be. I don't understand that. And from a fan's perspective, because they really don't know much at all. They just know what they read. They're not talking to the coaches and players like I am. They're like, you announced in April that you're going to play August 5th. So why are you having a vote now? So if you're asking me for an answer, I don't have it, Reed. That's part of what, frankly, has made this league incredibly difficult to cover for me for the last 25 years, because it's never quite as it seems.
In terms of presenting the information or like giving you access to it, or what do you mean by that?
All of it. And you look, people have thought, and a lot of people in Canada have thought that the CFL was on par with the NHL and the NFL because, frankly, Reed, the games run national television every week, every game, right? They saw it up here. We got beautiful stadiums, all that. But people didn't realize that when money got tight, people were like, why aren't you playing? The NFL's playing. You heard it all the time. Everybody else is playing. Why can't you play? And a lot of people still haven't got their minds around that. So that's just one aspect. And then the other aspect is the salaries. You never know really how long a contract is when somebody signs it or for how much it is. The salaries aren't transparent. They're not disclosed. That's kind of difficult to cover, Reed. If a player, a big name player is going into his last year, but we don't really know whether he is or not, that's confusing to report on the league. So, and then just today, a guy on Twitter he's in Phoenix. He posted the NFL's health and safety protocols going into this year. He goes, has the CFL posted their health and safety protocols? I wrote him back. I said, no, and they won't. Right? So the NFL publishes this stuff. I don't know if the NHL ever did. The CFL is not going to. And by the way, it's going to be rigorous. Like I've talked to players that have not had a vaccination, Reed, and they are not going to get it. I've seen the letters that have gone from the teams to the players that said, if you're not fully vaccinated showing up for training camp, this is what you're going to have to expect. You're not going to be able to leave your apartment. You're not going to be able to leave the hotel on the road. You're not going to be able to go home on a bye week. You're basically going to be in jail for the next 4 months. This isn't a big secret. Farhan Lalji reported it on TSN. He said, how hard is it going to be for a player coming from Florida or Texas who's been living wide open for 6 months to go back into self-isolation? Nobody's seen those letters. The public hasn't seen those. I mean, I've seen them, but that's the thing. And now I don't want to, obviously we don't want to talk COVID. We've talked about that enough, but it's just that debate. If a player doesn't want to get a shot, he shouldn't have to get a shot. This is stuff that people don't really know what they're battling internally.
I remember you guys talking about that, and I saw those clips from Farhan where it's like, I mean, do you think people are going to be okay with that?
Players?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that they police themselves. I mean, one comment a coach said to me was, these guys have a tough time following the rules when there aren't any rules. How are they going to follow these rules? And you're not making millions. It was pretty easy to tell a Seahawk to stay in this hotel and you're going to make $5 million US this year, but you're making 50,000 Canadian as an American rookie. And you better love football to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and obviously a lot smaller scale, but, with the spring league back in November, the guys weren't getting enough food. So they went out to go get a burger. I mean, it wasn't like they were out partying or doing, they just went to go get something else to eat. Well, they ended up having that. I mean, they had to shut the whole thing down because they couldn't keep the COVID. And that's a lot smaller of a scale, but it has to be even tougher when you have these 9 teams across the whole country.
And you and I haven't lived it. Very few people have this bubble life. But I mean, I just did a hockey season, a shortened 24-game season for the Western Hockey League that the Thunderbirds play in a bubble here. And the teams had to play in a university or stay in a university dorm for 2 solid months. I'll be honest with you. I broadcast the games. They came out of that and said, never again. Next season, if we have to go into the bubble, we're not doing it. We won't play. And that was 2 months. You're asking CFL players to do July, August, September, October, November, December. If you go 6 months of bubble life for not a lot of money. Not saying they won't. I'm definitely not saying they won't. Those junior hockey players did it. We're talking about grown men here. So these are some of the hurdles that are left. Like Justin Dunk was on my show the other day and he said there's a lot of things behind the scenes. They're scrambling. He thinks they'll get done and they'll kick off August 5th. But we don't have the provinces signing off on returns to play and stuff, which is another thing. It's not the governor's fault. But we don't have all the information of what's being discussed between the government and the CFL teams. We don't know. They're acting like they're going to get these approvals. But as we sit here today, they don't have them yet. I assume they're going to get them. They don't have them yet. And to me, that would make me feel a little anxious.
Well, and also, I mean, just hiring back some of these staff and things. I mean, besides the players, right? You're going to have to, I imagine a lot of these staff members have been furloughed, right, or laid off, and so we're trying to do all that and do the training camps and do everything. I mean, it's June 16th today. I mean, it does feel tight. Rushed.
Exactly. And they're working around the clock. I have no doubt that they want to play. They committed to play and they want to play, which is another thing. I can't believe that it took me this long, which is kind of elementary after everything that I've told you. I got a call on Saturday from a guy from the team, high up executive, and he just said, Rod, just so you know, like we're gonna try this. On Monday, the vote will be yes, we're gonna move ahead. And what I took from that was we're gonna start. We might not necessarily finish. Okay, and I think that's a key sentence out of all of it. They're gonna start. And for me, that's all I wanted. I think that's all what the players wanted was the attempt to, right? Like I said, I'd rather go down swinging than stand on the edge of the dance floor. Right, which is what they did last year. They're going to go down swinging, and maybe it'll all work out. But if there's an outbreak on the Hamilton Tiger Cats, because 30 guys catch COVID, it could spell the end to everything.
Do you have faith in the commissioner to kind of see this through to August?
Well, I mean, he made us. Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know how much of it's up to him. I think he's done a lot of his work already. But I mean, convincing all the owners to just play. And then you got to rely on your people, which I know Randy Ambrosi does do that. The people with the teams, his own people internally. I don't know. I'm sure it's insulting to say that he's done all his work. He's got nothing to do now. I'm sure he's got a ton to do. I don't know. We've asked for an interview for him and they said he's too busy. He's lined up with interviews. So he's not hiding. But I was just real impressed a year ago when Roger Goodell stood up and said, we're kicking off at September 1st and the stadiums will be full. Just instilled confidence, right? Now, the stadiums weren't full, but they did kick off. So I think what Randy's trying to do is instill confidence in everybody that they're going to kick off. But like, again, it's frantic behind the scenes. I mean, Charleston Hughes said I'm planning to go to Toronto on this date for training camp. I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Is that not a pretty good indication that there's a lot of loose ends here? And that can be tied up in the next few weeks for sure. But as of today, like you say, this is the situation.
Yeah, because again, we never want to be doom and gloom on here, but I feel like it is okay to ask questions, right? And we've been accused a lot of being, negative, even with the XFL stuff. And I'm like, it's okay to ask questions and trying to get transparency and clarity and figuring things out. Just saying like, well, it's okay, August 5th, we'll see you see you in 6 weeks. Like, I don't feel like that serves anybody. And I mean, I know you agree with that.
Yeah, well, but that's the point where I'm just kind of tired of giving my opinion on where things are at because I don't have all the information.
Yeah.
And if I sat here and said today, I'll still believe it that they're going to kick off on August 5th when I see them on the field at August. There's a lot of people in the league that still feel that way. A lot of broadcasters, a lot of football operations people that say we'll believe it when we see it. And I'm just kind of sitting here saying that. I'm trying to be positive with it. And I see how happy the players are. I mean, I talked to some Rough Riders players that last week, they're like, I'm coming to Regina Tuesday expecting a yes vote. So they better vote yes. And then they did, right? So these are guys, by the way, they're older. My friends are the older guys they've kind of seen their careers pass before their eyes here. Like the average pro football career is 1.5 years. When I started in this gig, it was 3 years. That's how much it's shrunk. We've missed 1.5 seasons by the time they kick off August 5th, if they do. That's how I knew that they were going to agree to the amendments to the CBA, because the alternative is retiring. And that's literally the last possible thing they wanted to do.
It's hard. I mean, it really is. It's like an impossible situation. I mean, there was no, and even with that vote, like you said, if we don't get to August 5th, but there's no way they weren't at least going to go ahead right now. You know, you can't.
That's how it looks. Yeah.
So kind of to my original question, we obviously, and that's great. So like, has this weighed on everybody? Like, are we, I even hear you, like, I'm done answering these questions. I'm done talking about this. I mean, this isn't, we're kicking off to the season here, right? I mean, is that scary that not scary, but that people are just like, I'm kind of over it already.
Well, who are you talking about? Fans, players, media, staff, everybody?
Well, I mean, general sentiment online has been pretty negative until the vote and everything Monday, Tuesday.
I chalk a lot of that up to fraught nerves of 16 months of a pandemic, and people are just on edge. And I'll be honest, I mean, you don't live in Canada. I mean, we turn on the games and see all these American stadiums that are full, ballparks, football stadiums, hockey arenas in Vegas, and we're not. Like, enough's enough. Like, I talked to a guy in Alberta, CFL guy, who said, hey, in our city, nobody's wearing masks. We're over it. To use your term, right? No, the government's not even enforcing the mask mandate anymore. Like, we're over it. So people are over it. So let's put it this way. They better get on the field, the CFL, because they've got hopes incredibly high. The hopes were incredibly high going into the vote, and they passed that. So kudos, good on them again. But they better be on the field August 5th, because I don't think people emotionally could take another delay.
I want to talk about the XFL stuff a little bit, because it did get brought up, again this week. Well, first off, why do you think that lived, like, it's in his head, right? It's in people's mouth. Like, why is this such negative connotation? And it's like, get my name out of your mouth. Like, quit. I mean, it just seems like it's really easy. Like, okay, let's toss shade at the XFL. Let's toss shade at the, now the USFL and that whole thing. I mean, why do you think that that's still, and like you said, it got so negative so quick?
I think a lot of it is just football, the mentality of football people. I had CFL people the day the USFL announced their relaunch texting me saying, this is laughable. They're a joke. Their owners hasn't paid his guys in the spring. It's just an immediate to trash. Basically your competition. That's just a business thing. You're a businessman. You know how that works. The other thing is resistance to change, not just necessarily from a football perspective, but people don't like change. Like number 2. Number 3, people have loved this league for 100 years. I'm sure you're tired of hearing about it, right? And I guess if COVID can't kill the CFL, nothing will. And there's a huge anti-American sentiment, which I don't have. Half our viewers are in America. In normal times, I spend my football off seasons in America, in Florida or Arizona. Like, what's the problem here? I see it with our show. I think you and I talked about it the last time I was on with you. We've got more viewers because of our association. Why would we not want 9 teams in America and have more people selling jerseys and going to games and the US TV contract? And that's why I think it'll happen. That's why I think it's going that way. But from a fan perspective, they don't like to change and they love their game. But for Charleston Hughes to say it, I'm still stunned. It's more jobs, more opportunities, more games. I don't see the downside other than resistance to change.
My working theory with all of this, and this is just from us covering all this, and you know more, and all the people I talk to know a lot more, but I think there was, I heard a lot, one league, one rule book, all this kind of stuff. I've heard, certain CFL teams reaching out, whatever. I think the backlash and everything that we are seeing, I don't think that the XFL and all that anticipated all of that right? Because I've heard it much more softening now to, partnership, working agreement, right? Where forever it was, we're merging all this stuff. I know we had comments that you had on, I think AJ Jakubek's show. I can't remember one of the shows a while back, they're moving the goalposts and doing all that stuff. And now I just think that the backlash that we've all seen, maybe they weren't expecting all that as well.
Oh, I guarantee they weren't. Absolutely they weren't. But it's been 4 months, by the way, since Randy Ambrosie dropped that bomb. And I think it was a bomb, March 10th. I'll guarantee you he didn't expect this, because most leagues view negative publicity as the worst thing. If anybody's saying something bad about you, oh my God, we got to shut them up and stop. The NFL's so big, they don't care. You know that. You're in an NFL market. Say whatever you want. We don't care. We're bigger than you. CFL is not that. So I'm of the mindset, negative publicity is better than none. You can see that. That's how I roll. CFL does not. So I will guarantee you they didn't expect this coming. And who likes to have negative things said about them? I'm sure Danny Garcia and The Rock don't like, who's the guy, Jerry Cardinale? The most horrible things have been said about those guys. The Toronto Business Journal called the Rock a pimp. And that's when I started to get upset, saying, he didn't do anything to you. He's actually literally almost said nothing. Like what is wrong with you people? And that's where I really folded my tents and just said, I'm done with this because I don't need it. You're saying things that are personal. The media has said things personally about Randy Ambrosie that I guarantee you Randy Ambrosie will never forget. I haven't forgot it, and I'm not necessarily willing to chalk that up to the fact that a newspaper guy was worried about losing his job. Like, get it together, man. Like, there's something about decency here. You can see that line's been leapt over, not just crossed, over a damn football merger.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, I see, and part of it's with Twitter and social media and stuff, but I see just some of the most horrendous stuff written. And I mean, and it's one thing, I come on here and you we know who we are, right? People watch your show every day, but all these people, I'm these writers and fans and stuff, and it's the most hateful stuff. And I'm like, you can't say stuff like that. You can't.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I think pretty much everything I've said, I stand behind. That's what I do. You're the same. But I'm just saying there's a lot of people saying things in the heat of a moment right now that I think will come back and haunt them. I really do. But back to where we started this. The CFL is going to play their 14-game schedule. 9 teams agreed to it. Away we go. Reed, we're going to be revisiting this. The second the Grey Cup's over in December, we're going to be talking about the merger. And when's it going to happen? And we're going to be living this again. I think. I don't see it ending.
No, I hope not for our working relationship and everything else. I mean, I feel like I said, I'm someone, and we both, there are many, many more smart, talented CFL media covering all this stuff. We are just blessed to be able to talk to you now, right? That to me, growth is good in that way, right? Where, we were just such a pissant little thing when it was just the XFL. And now that it's involved in kind of this bigger world picture, I'm I just can't figure out why people don't get why that's not a good thing to expand and grow. It's crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, there's an American football reporter that's pretty tied into the CFL, and he had mentioned to me about the merger. He expects the merger to happen. He's got good contacts in Canada, and he goes, "There's a lot of people lying right now." And in leadership positions. And back to your question as to why is it so difficult to cover this league? It's that you don't really know who to believe. And that goes back to COVID too. You don't know what politicians to believe. You don't know what health officials to believe and who has an agenda. So that's what's made it very difficult. I mean, I like to think, a lot of the forefathers of the Saskatchewan Roughriders here, past presidents, governors kind of thing, they're like, listen, if we got to merge, fine. The U.S. expansion in the 90s with the CFL is a great example. There would be no CFL if they didn't do that. And if you got your Rough Riders running around in green uniforms and they're playing the Sacramento Gold Miners, who really cares? So it's what you're saying, growth and everything. So I didn't necessarily think they were going to agree to all play unanimously. And I thought that might just infight him into the ground, but they did. So will they find a general consensus on merging or not merging? It's going to be one or the other. And we'll know within the next year. But I have no idea because I don't know who to believe.
Naylor was on something talking about, if The Rock showed up like a Calgary game or something, what would be the fan reaction? And I responded, Raiders of the Lost Ark when they, at the end, when all the faces melt. Because I'm like, I don't think it would be a positive thing if The Rock or Dan knew that. I mean, I feel like it is that negative now. And I know that Twitter is I know that it's like the vocal whatever, but it is so toxic. It's not like a little angry. It's so toxic.
I got a sense that your feelings haven't been hurt, however, in any of what's been said.
No, but it is. I just it's very difficult for me. And again, I try to respect all sides and whatever, but it's very difficult for me to have that much of my who I am wrapped up in this Canadian Football League. Like that is so much of my, like I've reached out to some of the CFL media and they've laughed or they've said, F you or get out. And I'm like, like heaven forbid we try to, expand the conversation. It's very negative for some of the people that want it to be. And I don't get that, where you can trash like, us or the podcast or the show or whatever, but then we're not supposed to take it personally, but then they are because it fits. You know what I mean? Like,
you've learned enough and seen what I've posted and said on my show that stuff doesn't bother me. Yeah. But I've undergone a lot of change in my life, positive each time. I can handle it, but I can just imagine by name who the media was that gave you that reaction. You don't need to tell me. And I mean, I can sort of understand that. Same thing with Charleston Hughes in that their livelihood's tied to it. That I get. But the stuff from the fans makes no sense to me. Because at the end of the day, it's about entertainment, and you're going to go to your 9-to-5 job tomorrow. You get their identities wrapped up in being a CFL fan. I'm a season ticket holder, 35 years. I hear it all the time. But if this league goes down, you're going to work tomorrow, right? Like it doesn't affect your livelihood. But those guys that are getting so uptight about it, I have a little more time for them, but it doesn't give you any right to speak to people this way.
Oh, the players. I mean, and especially covering like the TSL and Fan Control Football, all these smaller leagues, I feel for all of those players, right? And when they voted, because we have guys that have been on the show that we've covered and like, thank God now they at least get a chance to go make it, right? They get to go up to Canada and at least try to get on the squad. And it just, that's who I feel for. Yeah. It's not the people that I'm watching this on Sunday. No,
yeah. Well, and we also have to remember a huge big picture item here is what has made us as sports people all have to step back in the pandemic and realize we're not that important. Because I've been dealing with the hockey leagues, the National Lacrosse League, obviously the CFL, and the government is literally saying, get away. We're trying to save lives here. Right. And listen, sports people, to them, it is life and death. And until now, we had no reason to think otherwise. Right. You got 40,000 people showing up to cheer you when you step on the field. Why wouldn't you think that you're the number one thing in the world? Like, it's not their fault. But the pandemic has made us all realize the CFL is getting it. We'll get to you when we get to you. And that's why I think that there's a lot of this rushed stuff and they're, got their fingers crossed that they're going to get their health protocols approved and their return to play and all the rest hasn't been announced yet. That's been a major slice of humble pie for all of us, but specifically the CFL.
I don't want to hold you too long. I'm so thankful. I got one more question for you while I have you here. We've been doing a lot of the C218 stuff, right? The sports betting and all of that. I just wanted to get your take on that, where to me, I feel like XFL talks have really soured as the idea of getting the single game sports betting, getting that cash and everything right. The three down guys, can offset what we lose every year. We can build on that. Do you feel like that those are connected at all, that the CFL's reliance on the XFL maybe is going down as the idea that we can do this Canadian made solution that like Randy Ambrosie talks about is going up?
From what I hear, it's not going down at all.
Okay.
No, that's what I hear. I mean, you can bet on the CFL, you can bet on the CXFL, right? That's not going to change anything. The money from betting is going to be the same whether they merge or whether they don't.
But they don't need the XFL maybe as much anymore because they can get the CFL betting. So that's where I'm like, I'm seeing one like XFL talks with the betting now. Like maybe we can do that instead.
That's the first I've heard of that notion.
Okay.
I still think there's a desire from the majority of people in the CFL to merge at leadership positions. And they also want the betting money.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't, that's just the sense. But I'm not lying to you, obviously. This is just what I hear. I'm not in those meetings, but I do think it's going to happen. I mean, honestly, although, John Ryan, who you would know well, came on our show, and he was also in the Regina Leader Post here saying that he's buddies with whoever owns the Dallas Renegades XFL team. And they told them that there's not going to be any interlocking play. You probably saw that comment, right? CFL stays up here, XFL stays down here, and maybe they play a championship game. I think you had mentioned that, didn't you? That you could see that. I hope that's not the case, because I want to make road trips to Dallas and Tampa and St. Louis to watch games. I do. I don't like that idea, but they're not consulting me.
Yeah, not nearly as exciting, I think, to do this umbrella with. I mean, that's the big thing we have right now is that's kind of the theory floating that Mike Mitchell's been on shows and stuff lately and talking about this, both leagues under kind of an umbrella, similar partnership of some kind, and not necessarily this merged league, which I think is far more exciting.
Well, I think the XFL talk's gone down because the CFL's playing this year. That's why. It's not a coincidence. That would be my guess. And I don't think CFL leaders at this time want any talk about it because they've seen how toxic it is. They don't like negative publicity. It was a great question by you. Did I think that they expected this? There's no way they could have. And if they had known, I don't think they would have dropped it.
You mean that the spoiler, hey, we've been talking.
The collaboration. Yeah.
We're talking about talking. Yeah, I don't know. I tell you, the longer and I'll let you go here, but I remember when you were coming on our show before, and we started watching your show, and you were talking about, I know this information and people, and where do you know that? Show your sources, and you'd be like, well, what do you want me to do? Like show text, and I feel like we're getting to that now where, we're covering these things and talking with people. And I feel I really get where you're coming from now with a lot of this stuff. And I feel like, not that we're a fraction of how into everything you are, but I do feel like I get that now, even just from the small sliver that we've been covering it. And I can't imagine, I'm sure it's very difficult to have done this for as long as you have. So
how do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, just that, just stuff with the XFL and, we try to talk about stuff on our show and people don't want to hear it. And you're like, well, that's kind of what's happening. They're like, well, unless you can show it in writing, I don't believe you. No. You're like, okay, well then don't. I can't I'm like, what do I gain from lying about anything, right? We hear things, we talk about what we hear, but we both work way too hard on this to be like BSing and lying about something, right? Like
my integrity and credibility is everything.
Yeah.
Right. So once it's gone, you don't get it back. I know that for a fact. But here's a great example of this. I had mentioned on my show last week, this is what I believe is going to happen. And I said, can you please give me one incident in the last year, incidents where I was wrong? And a PR guy from the team, the CFL, texted me. He goes, oh, the fact that you said the MLSE is funding the CFL. And I'm like, I didn't say they're funding the CFL. I said they're running the CFL. Big difference. Yep. And if MLSE had decided they didn't want to play August 5th, they weren't playing. They are running the CFL. I don't care. But what that told me because this guy's a really good buddy of mine, PR guy in the CFL. People are only hearing what they want to hear. Yeah. And that's, again, a life thing, not just a CFL fan or staffer thing. So again, why do I even do it? Because you're only hearing what you want to hear, Well,
but it's like you said, keeping the CFL as relevant as you have in the last year by covering this. Like you said, if it's not you, then who, right? I mean, who? Yeah, it's like this has to exist, and we have to do these shows every week, or it doesn't. It just doesn't exist anymore. It's people don't get outside out of mind is very scary nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just kind of, you say, how's my week then? I think about Pat McAfee saying whenever he said it that COVID killed the CFL. We kind of thought that it did. If Pat McAfee says it, it's probably true. And lo and behold, COVID hasn't killed the CFL. It's a miracle. So I'm just kind of relishing in that and enjoying the fact that we're going to have games and something to talk about on our show. I mean, we've survived with NHL and NFL, but our bread and butter is the CFL. So I'm just relishing in that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I didn't want to go back to the well too soon before, but I felt like this was a good time now with everything happening and the big vote. And so I appreciate you hopping on and just saying, yep, like just tell me when. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we'll return the favor. You'll be on my show here. And actually you can break down some games for us. You can give us the view from 50,000 feet. How about that?
Okay. That's a scary sentiment, but thank you.
All right. Thanks, Reed.
Awesome. Thanks.
Welcome back. Want to thank the trio, Jim, Rod, Steve, for stopping in, chatting with Reed. I was, at work and unavailable during something. I actually had a doctor's appointment too that I wanted to talk to Jim. I wanted to chat with Jim about everything and hear his Yankees, Yankees bet in person. I accept. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Jim was fired up. I appreciate that. And like I said, that was just kind of supposed to be a run-in thing. And I mean, President of Football Canada wants to talk to you. I mean, I'm not going to say no. And so, but yeah, Rod was kind of going to be the main star and then Jim and that all, and obviously Steve as well. So really appreciate that. Again, like just trying to bring you guys, again, don't trust us, but trust the people we talk to and the information we try to give. Like that's my whole thing is, maybe I'm the liar, but not everyone we talk to are liars. So,
I mean, that's the thing. Like, don't think that Reed's a liar because we interview someone. That's just not. I don't know. I don't understand the logic of that. So, moving on. Redbird Capital shopping 40% of NLPA's and MLBPA's business venture as value source. They own 40% of One Team Partners, which leverages pro football and baseball players' name, images, and likenesses. It could be worth up to $800 million 2 years after it launched in 2019. Do you know why they might be doing this?
Well, the idea is, they're freeing up some cash. And also they really rode this on the rebound. So here's the thing, if you want to be all scary, XFL, CFL stuff, right? So they bought into this, got the huge growth by licensing these players' images and things, even in the last year when they weren't playing, right? They got tremendous growth. Well, now they're trying to offload it. So if you're doing the whole, like, we're scared of the XFL thing as CFL people, this is a scary thing because you're like, well, are they going to get in with the XFL and CFL and all that stuff? Are they going to build that? We don't know, right? Obviously, but this is something, and there's a lot more info here. That was I put those key points at the top, but you have a thought?
I'm seeing the real reason why they should be doing this down. It's the last paragraph you put here, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but
you're good.
For example, when Jay-Z owned part of the Brooklyn Nets, and then wanted to start his sports agency, there's a conflict of interest that exists. So if you have a company that owns part of the MLBPA, can they really own Fenway Sports? They shouldn't be able to.
Oh, there you go. So, I mean, anyway, to me, I see both sides. I see the conflict of interest and I see them also riding that wave. And that is interesting. What is their long-term plan? They've, said they're committed to, they want the XFL to be a 100-year brand, right? But is Redbird involved in that the whole time? I don't know, right? Maybe do they sell that off? And, because it's Danny and them and then the investment. So I don't know. Anyway, very, very interesting with that. We got a ton of XFL signings here and notes before we get to Spring League stuff. Do you want to start? Cam Phillips came out like right after the freaking show. I couldn't believe I got on, but congrats to Cam Phillips, former. He was on the Roughnecks with PJ Walker.
And he's signing with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So congrats to Cam Phillips. Ron Rivera talking about Taylor Heineke. He says the one thing you could say about him is that he's an extremely accurate passer. He delivers a really good ball to the receivers. His rapport with those receivers is also very good. We have a guy in Taylor that shows us he can do it. I'm telling you, if Fitzmagic doesn't work out, Taylor's going to be starting. This is a great quote. If you're a Taylor Heineke fan on the Washington football team, this is a phenomenal quote to hear from Ron Rivera. And I did see this, that Jordan Tamu and former Generals wide receiver COC Mariner, are at the Ravens camp for tryouts. So, and then also Brian Corey of the Defenders, that was added on. There was a couple of tweets out. This is all kind of scattered stuff. And then today, Demore Pearson he was trying out with the Broncos. He got signed to the practice squad. Like I just saw that today per Adam Schefter that he got signed. He was in Nebraska, and then he was on the XFL for the Battlehawks. So if you're a Battlehawks guy, you maybe have some interest in watching the Broncos this season. A wide receiver that's on the practice squad right now, but maybe he'll get called up. Hopefully no injuries, call that. Maybe he just works his ass off and gets on the main roster. Falcons are signing former wide receiver kick returner Jeff Bidet. He is a former Dallas Renegades player, and he has runs a 4.27. Very good.
Here's if you're an anti-XFL, anti-Rock person. Rock was on the cover, or he's going to be on the cover of People magazine this week. The tagline was "Fame, Fatherhood, and Finding Peace," and then the subtitle was "Why he just might run for president." Voice of XFL fans everywhere. This is why we're not getting the XFL, because the Rock's too busy running for president.
We don't need any more. I don't think we need any more celebrities running for president, please. No more of that. No more.
I'll tell you, as polarizing as his Biden his Biden endorsement was back last year, I mean, that was like shots fired. So I don't know what's going to happen if he runs for president.
That was so fierce.
Yeah. Anyway, XFL, that's what I got. I thought the Redbird thing was interesting this week, and then obviously all these signings and stuff. I encourage you to check out this Kevin Kugler interview. Tremendous, talking about the Spring League stuff, and then we'll got more stuff. I'll let you toss to it. But I want to sell this Kevin interview. I thought it was very tremendous.
Well, we'll definitely take a listen to that. He's going to preview the Mega Bowl, and he's going to talk about the USFL. That's coming up next.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. We're just riding off a good weekend of games, kind of going into this Mega Bowl. What has been your thoughts so far on everything Spring League related?
Here's what I've liked about it. You know, there is. I grew up in the old USFL days. I've watched different incarnations of trying to make spring football work, and I know it can work. You and I both know there is a market for this, and to me, the Spring League and the USFL to come, and there is a demand for something else to A, fill the time for football fans, and B, for opportunities for players who have the chance to move up to the next level. And that's the best thing about the Spring League for me, is the chance to tell the stories of some of these guys who have not had the chance to have their stories told, and then get the chance maybe as a result to go to the next level. I think that's a really cool thing.
Well, and especially, I mean, the last year and a half with everything, I mean, besides any other year in time and all the players, but, here's all these guys haven't had a chance to play. I mean, we've been covering the CFL, they obviously missed the whole, so it's like now more than ever, there's like this pent up just supply of talent and hard work. And I mean, it's crazy to think, I used to work in news too. I used to work at Q13, and I equated it like, there's only X number of like camera guy jobs. Doesn't matter how talented you are or not, right? There's just only so many slots.
Oh, absolutely. And when you limited the amount, for example, last year in the preseason, the NFL limited the amount of guys that could go to their rookie mini camps. So normally where you'd have a chance maybe to have 15 or 20 rookies in a mini camp, get the chance to see what they can do. That didn't exist last year. So you take that away. CFL doesn't play. You don't have any other opportunities to put yourself out there, to put yourself on film doing things against other guys. I mean, it's one thing to catch passes or throw passes against air. Okay, that's nice. I can see your motion. I can see if you can run an outcut, but I can't tell how you're going to do when you've got pressure in your face, how you're going to do when you've got a defender right up locking you down. Those are the kinds of things that the Spring League can provide these guys that opportunity to show. And you've seen it. You've started to see now guys coming out of the Spring League to go to a mini camp, to go sign on a roster, to get a chance to perform. Now that we're opening back up and the pandemic, we hope, fingers crossed, is waning, then these opportunities show up. And where have these guys had a chance to play? It's really only been here. And so this year especially was a really good year for the Spring League to be able to make this season work.
How do you think the football compares to what you're used to watching and covering? I think, and I can't remember how much preseason whatever they had in the November session. I do feel like it took a little while to get going this time. What are your thoughts on the football?
I think the football that we saw the last couple of weeks of the Spring League was so much better than what we saw at the beginning. And I won't say that as a broad brush, because I thought Ryan Mallett came out in the first game and had a really good start to his return to football. I thought he looked sharp, but you see this as you go through the season, you would think by weeks 5 and 6, it's better because you've had more practice, you've had game reps, you've had opportunities. We talked with coaches and they all compared it to this past week would have been the equivalent of a second or third NFL preseason game. You've had the run up, you've had the camp, you've had the practices. Now you're getting some games in. So when you get to that third preseason game in the NFL, that's always the game that's on national TV. That's always the game that everybody sees the starters for more than any other game in the preseason. Back at least in the old days of 4 preseason games. I'm not sure how it'll work this year. But with 4 preseason games, that third one was always the so-called game test. Well, that's kind of where we are right now with the Spring League. You've gotten through all the initial fits and starts. You have some guys transitioning on and off the roster. But I thought the level of play the last couple of weeks was a lot smoother than what we saw at the beginning, and that's to be expected.
Standouts for you in terms of talent that you saw?
It's funny. I start with a kicker because Liram Hajrullahu not only is a great story, if he is not given an opportunity to be in an NFL camp, he's the best kicker I've seen in the Spring League, and it's not close. I mean, Jonathan Song, really, really good. I don't want to take anything away from him because he had a really good Spring League as well, and I'm guessing he'll get a shot. But Hajrullahu showed the ability to kick long. He showed the ability to kick off long, which I think is a big deal. And he is somebody who has been through it at a high level before. He's been through the CFL. He's been through some big moments in the CFL. He's obviously been through some big moments in his past, having to escape a war-torn nation to get to Canada, to have the chance to be where he is right now. To me, that's the number one name when I think of guys who have stood out in this league. It's somebody like that who makes a jump. And then, you look around and you see a guy like Ryan Willis, for example, for the lineman, and we'll see in the Mega Bowl this weekend. I think Ryan Willis acquitted himself extremely well during the Spring League. He looked like he had the poise to be able to make some plays. Does he get a chance to be on a roster as a number 3 quarterback maybe in the NFL? Maybe he does. Maybe he gets a shot to go to a camp. I think he's got the physical tools, 6'4", 225, got a little bit of mobility. He's not going to run around like Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to run around like Lamar Jackson, but maybe he can get out there and perform at a level to where as a second or third guy, he gets his opportunity. And you can go on and on. This could be a long conversation about guys who I have seen stand out because you look around the rosters this weekend that we're going to see in the Mega Bowl, and you look at a guy like Adewale Adeoye, who I thought has had some nice plays for the linemen on the defensive line. Darius Moraney has done some nice things for the Jousters on the defensive line. Just a couple of names that pop into my head as far as defensive guys. There is talent in this league, and I think we've seen that talent, a lot of talent on the offensive line that is always hard for me to evaluate, quite honestly. But the numbers that you see starting to get called to go up to camps at the next level show that the scouts are paying attention to what they see in the lines, and they like what they see.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had Cole Boozer on our show a couple weeks ago. He's a longtime friend of the show. And I mean, here he got signed. He's on his way, and hopefully as we record on Monday, the CFL vote and everything. But, it's a real thing that these players are getting the eyeballs that they need to move on.
Oh, there's no question. And you're not getting that opportunity without live reps against other people, which is where there's always been this void for spring football. There's no true developmental league for the NFL. We all know that. College football has sort of served as that developmental league, but where is that middle ground, that NBA D league, that middle ground for the minor league baseball? Where is that for football? And that's where leagues like the Spring League, leagues like the USFL coming next year, that's where those are going to not only provide a fix for us football fans, but an opportunity for guys to be able to say, hey, I know I fell through the cracks for whatever reason, but I've grown since this, or I'm better than I was at this point. And for example, Sal Cannella is a great example of what the Spring League can do for somebody. He plays for the Generals in the fall. He plays again in the spring, gets the call at the end of the Spring League season, and is going to Bears minicamp now. That's the first opportunity a guy like that has had to even be in a mini camp. He was a wide receiver. He transitioned. He's added weight. He's tried to learn the tight end position, but he's still 23 years old. So he's got that opportunity, and he doesn't get that opportunity if he didn't play in the fall and he didn't play in the spring, to have the chance to get those live reps. And that's where to me, those are the kind of stories that are cool, that pop out of. I'm an old minor league guy. I did minor league basketball. It was one of my first career things. And to me, the story of guys persevering to get to that next level, that excites me. That fires me up, and it should for sports fans, because, these aren't the first round picks. These are the guys who are grinding, and those are the guys I appreciate.
I want to know from someone, working, right, you're, like professionally, prepping for the games, covering this. I remember back in November, we were, getting ready for the first, whatever they were, the kind of extended season. We didn't really know what to expect. A lot of people, and we were covering it, and we turned on the games. Great production, great calls, all the, everyone covering it. They've all done their homework. Everybody knows everything, right? I mean, it feels, so how is it for you, getting assigned this or whatever to call these games?
I love football. So that's the first part. I would have not said yes if I didn't love doing football. So I love to call football. The opportunity to call more football is not something I'm going to turn down. So that aside, the chance to do that, it's been really interesting. At times I feel like I'm doing CSI football, because I've got to sift through some of the backstories of these guys, because it's, I can usually find what they did in college. So then you go, okay, you graduated college, you left college in 2016. It's 2021. What have you done in those 5 years in between? So it's sort of, I'm piecing through, finding articles. It's required me to do, honestly, more digging to find stories out than if I'm doing an NFL game and those stories are so well known. I don't have to find a story on Tom Brady. Everybody knows what Tom Brady is. I don't have to tell that story. But I have to find a story on DeQuan Hampton, the tight end for the Jousters, who was at USC, played for the Wildcats in the XFL, transitioning from wide receiver to tight end, started in a community college, was a junior college All-American, gets to USC, didn't get a whole lot of opportunity there, but is staying with it. Those are the kinds of things that you kind of have to piece together, like, okay, where is he? What's he doing? What's going on? Guys like Tijan Karoma, the center for the Jousters, who was gone all last week from practice because he took a real job and had to go to work all week long. And so still gets back, still plays, still starts at center. Why did he do that? Where has he been since he left BYU? There's just those are the kind of things that, for me, it's been a challenge, but a fun one. I mean, I don't have 9 other games going on right now. I've got the spring league going on right now. So it gives me the chance to dig into the stories a little bit more and maybe be able to tell some of the stories that we've told over the last several weeks on these broadcasts.
That's interesting. So you're really having to go through yourself and really find a lot of that information out.
Oh, no doubt. There's so much transition in any minor league. And I when I worked minor league basketball, I was also the PR guy. So there's a lot of similarity to that, in that I got to find out where this guy has been before he joined our team so I can write a press release about him. Well, I'm not writing a press release now, but I got to find out where this guy's been so I can tell the story about it. Because here's the thing. If I get it wrong or I don't tell the story, I'm going to hear about it. People are going to say, dude, that's not right at all. This is what this guy, because mom, dad, brother, sister, buddy is watching, and everybody knows where to find you in the world of social media. And they have no problem reaching out saying, you screwed that up. Here's why. And the players pay attention. We told Stan Bedwell's story one of the first weeks of the spring league, and he tweeted it out to everybody because, he had told us a story. We shared the story. It's a great story. Luis Perez, great story. I mean, there's so many of these that we share with the public, but if we get it wrong, it's on us. So, it requires me to do maybe a little more legwork to find some of this stuff. And I enjoy that. I mean, the heart of a league like this is, yes, you're showcasing the football, but you're also telling the story, because I can turn on an NFL game. You can turn on an NFL game and something about at least half of the players. I mean, it's not a big surprise when, Patrick Mahomes does something, or when Tom Brady does something, or, the guys. Nobody knows these guys. So you're sort of introducing it to an audience, the league and the players. And so that's, Joel Klatt and I will get the chance to do that this weekend for the Mega Bowl, and I'm looking forward to it.
Mega Bowl, a great name, or the greatest name for the Spring League Championship?
So it's clearly the greatest name. I mean, if there's not Mega Bowl parties cropping up all over America, we've all done this wrong. I mean, it's just the greatest name ever. Super Bowl is fine, but now you've got the Mega Bowl. It's got to be like a notch above, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room here too is this USFL stuff coming out, right? We had been, our wonderful listeners that keep us apprised of everything have been tracking all these trademarks and everything back earlier. I don't know if we expected it to kind of come out in the middle of this season. Reactions, thoughts to all this USFL stuff?
Well, from a nostalgia standpoint, I couldn't have been more excited. And it's such an interesting thing because you could see it from everybody that was a USFL person as a kid on social media. Because when the announcement came, it's people all across the spectrum. I had this Showboats hat. I had this Maulers T-shirt. I had this. All of these people remember the USFL back in the 80s strikes me today as something like, when Wilt Chamberlain scored his 100 points, now 8 billion people say they were in the stands for that. It feels like 8 billion people say they watched the USFL back. Oh, I watched the USFL religiously back in the day. Well, did you really watch it religiously? I don't know that you did, but I appreciate the nostalgia for it. I'm guilty of that. I went to Nebraska when I was a very young kid. Mike Rozier was drafted by the Pittsburgh Maulers. That was a big deal. He was a top pick. Everybody was, that got a lot of news when I was a kid in Nebraska because, my gosh, the Heisman Trophy winner's a USFL guy. That's, and of course, there's so many names now. Donald Trump, Herschel Walker, they're all associated with the USFL. Jim Kelly, just think about that, went on to obviously differing roles. But I love the notion of, can you recapture the perceived magic of the USFL? I think you can. I think it's going to be a huge thing when it starts next year to return the USFL, the names, the logos, the look. I think it's going to be huge. And I think it's the one, especially now, I think it's the spring league that can capture a greater amount of the imagination because there's so many people that have a natural affinity for, hey, the USFL resonates with me. I don't have to explain to you what the USFL is. I don't have to say to you, well, this is this and this is this. As a football fan. I think that's the cool thing about this.
Do you think, how do you think Brian, Mr. Woods and Fox and everything's going to do? I mean, 2022 is very, we've been trying to tell our XFL listeners for a while, 2022 is really short here, right? To be, what do we think about them actually hitting in the spring?
Well, I really think they're going to get it done. And I think there's a big drive to get it done. And I think, look, you've seen what we've done production-wise on the Spring League broadcasts. I'm proud of the work we've done. And I think, especially considering a lot of the restrictions that are still in place or were still in place as far as COVID goes, I think we've really done a phenomenal job in getting these games on the air, making them look good, making them sound good. Honestly, I wish the NFL would adopt some of the audio stuff that we've done on these games. The communication between the official and the replay official, as a football fan, to me is fascinating. Some of the sounds you hear from the players during the broadcast, I think, are really cool, that kind of access. And I know you're going to see more of that, larger, expansive access. There'll just be a lot of really cool bells and whistles that'll go along with the football and the nostalgia that the USFL brings. So I have no doubt they're going to be able to get this thing going. I have no doubt Fox is going to make it look great. I'm excited to see it.
What do you think about, just while we have you here, leaving that space? XFL was going to come, we get all caught up in the CFL stuff. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, people, to me, it's the fascinating story right now is, here was like the prince that was promised and then it's delayed. And now this is, now it's coming from left field.
The one thing I'm interested to see is the market going to be, is there going to be so much spring football all of a sudden that you're just like, whoa. I mean, I have no doubt they're players, but you have to make sure you have the right players in the league to make it work. You've got to have a couple of people that people recognize, at least in a periphery way, and you've got to have good quality play, because we can have all the nostalgia we want for a USFL. We can look back on a CFL or an XFL or anything. But if you roll out bad football consistently, it's going to be hard to keep people interested in it. It's got to be a good quality level of play. the XFL was a good quality level of play. We saw good football in the XFL. I think at this point in the spring league, we're starting to see some good football played in the spring league. You're starting to see some guys who are making plays and getting opportunities to go make plays elsewhere as a result. That's the thing that will keep this going is, can you provide good quality football because look, you and I know this, the people watching this stuff, they're hardcore football fans. They're not watching this because, oh gosh, I'm just really interested in, what Drew Anderson's going to do at quarterback. I'm sure Drew is, and I'm sure his family is, but we watch this because we love football. And if you don't provide football fans with good quality football, eventually it's not going to stick. So I think that's the challenge when you have any spring league, minor league, whatever it is can you provide a good quality viewing experience? And I think with the football we've seen and the differing production elements that have been included in it, I think it's been a good viewing experience. And I think you'll see more of that next year.
Do you think that the how do you feel the viewership? We were critical a little bit early on with the spring league this season, a little lack of promotion. It felt like going into it. How do you think, just in terms of viewership, that 400,000, 500,000, per week? How do you feel like that's been for those Fox games?
I think it's been pretty good. I didn't know what to expect for it, and maybe there's somebody in the upper reaches of Fox management that would say they had a differing view. I don't know that they did. I've never heard anybody say, hey, we expected X, Y, or Z for these broadcasts. To me, I thought that was pretty good for a league that is relatively, well, it's certainly new in this window. It's new in this time slot. It's new in this time frame in the sports calendar. And look, last fall, it kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit because the NFL was going on. All of the sports were so compressed at that time that it was hard to kind of keep track of everything that was happening. So now it's got a little bit bigger stage because it's more isolated away from some of the other stuff. Yeah, the NBA is still going on, NHL, we know that, but it's all in its normal windows now. So if you're looking for football, this is the football that it provides. I assume they're pleased with the numbers. I certainly think they should be. I think for a first true year of the spring league, I think it's been really impressive. And it just shows that football is such a huge thing in American sports that no matter when or what, if there's football on, somebody's going to go watch it.
And without any cities attached. I mean, that's the thing too, that people, it's really just, we call them, it could just be team A and team B and whatever, I think with that USFL and getting them back into the markets, do you, I don't want to hold you too long here. Do you see, and I don't know, we don't know or not, but the USFL, do you see them making that jump to cities next year, or just attaching the names and staying kind of in the bubble hubs? Because we had Brian on a couple weeks ago. He kind of talked about this.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not sure what the plan is. I assume part of it will be determined by what the landscape is with the pandemic. And if you feel that it's fine to be in these cities and have fans, I hope you can, because I think really the way you connect and build a league like the USFL, and this is just my opinion, is having that fan base that's generated by being in a market. It's hard to generate interest if you don't have that local affiliation to it. But if you're rolling out with the name brand of the USFL, which you are, and you're rolling out with some of the original franchise names, it'd be nice to have those in those original cities. It'd be nice to tie those into a Memphis or somewhere, to have that connection that you used to have with the USFL. And some of those cities would be overjoyed to see the USFL come back. And I know there's a fan base that's built in from years of nostalgia in those places that I think could make it an immediate success. And so, yeah, I hope that that's the case. I hope that they come back with cities attached, because in my lifetime as a sports fan, it's really hard to see a team without that local affiliation be able to thrive for a period of years. And I'm sure the end game is to have that set up in the USFL.
Last question today. Who do you got in the big Mega Bowl this weekend?
I like where the linemen are right now. I like the way Ryan Willis has played. They've been a little uneven over the last couple of weeks, but I think what Hal Mummy, speaking of great stories,
Yeah.
Hal Mummy, another great story. We have two great stories from head coaches, Kevin Gilbride and Hal Mummy in this game. But I think where Ryan Willis is with his game, and I think the problem that you're going to see with the Jousters is, okay, they've had so much flux at running back. 6 games, 6 starting running backs for the Jousters. Do they have the stability that they need to be able to get it done against a lineman team that's very confident, that has a lot of depth, and that has a quarterback that is very, very strong right now? And some of these, like Luis Perez and Drew Anderson are both likely going to play. That's not going to be the case with the lineman. Ryan Wilson is going to play from start to finish. I think that may give the lineman a little advantage.
I tell you, when they announced the teams last November, I said the Jousters. I said that is my team. That is we are going, and I have never wavered. And all these Johnny-come-latelys and everything else, and they can come on board. But
Jousters for life, huh?
Jousters for life. We have some merch that Brian sent us, the ugliest Jousters t-shirts you've ever seen, but we are here for it. Kevin, thank you so much for your time and setting this up. I could talk to you forever, but I really appreciate it. I know your time is important, and you're a valuable, busy man.
No, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the Twitter interaction during the games, and I look forward to one more game this weekend on Fox.
Can we get a year from you before we go?
Yer!
Awesome. Thanks, man.
And we're back. Want to thank Kevin Kugler for his time, talking all things Spring League and, of course, the USFL now that it's, kind of very similar. And on that note, Willie Yarberry, the defensive lineman, is expected to sign with the Chargers per Ian Rappaport. Rap sheet, throwing that out there.
Huge. So excited. Yarberry played in November back in the previous Spring League. He was up for, huge standout, big standout again this year. Couldn't be happier. Again, people talk about Spring League and paying to play and all that stuff. Hey, he's, getting the shot with the Chargers, right? You can't sneeze at that. Also, it was funny with Kevin. We were talking on setting up the interview. We were talking online, and I was like, "Hey, let me know what channels to go through. Do you want to come on the show?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, just send me the link." And I'm like, "Okay, well that's very nice," because I told him, I said the Spring League is, now we're never getting these interviews that we were promised now. But I'm like, it's very nice. He goes, "Oh yeah, just let me know we can do that. No problem." And I was like, I really appreciate fellow news media people making things very easy for us to do our job.
Love it. Jousters and linemen playing in the Mega Bowl. Who do we choose? I thought we were going to choose the Jouster. I thought we've always been the Jousters, but
I know, but we have Stan Bedwell, friend of the show, Cole Boozer, now hopefully future Alouettes star in the CFL on the linemen. Hal Mummy, I'm very torn with this. Have we gotten your thoughts on the Mega Bowl name?
I think we have, and I don't like it. I think it's kind of really, it's the Mega Bowl. Yay. I don't know.
It's like, it's so Brian Woods, it's not a Super Bowl, it's a Mega Bowl. I just see Brian, I love Brian, but I get to see
what's better than Super Mega. like you go to 7-Eleven, you're like, I don't want the Super Big Gulp, I want the Mega Big Gulp. Because that's bigger than the Super, apparently. Mega Man is apparently better than Superman. I don't know. Maybe.
I would take Superman over Mega Man any day.
That's what I.
Here is an interesting tidbit. If you are a anti USFL truther, so I can't speak. If you're anti USFL, what are they going to do? How are they going to launch? The Spring League currently, if you want the box scores from all the games and the stats and everything, they're currently, and this is a true story, released on Google Docs, right? They're Google Sheets that they send out. So
last thing, Google Docs.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say that, and obviously we have a great show and we produce our show via Google Docs, and that's fine. But it is interesting to me that the Spring League that is trying to make the leap to be a national football, competitor to the XFL and all these things is releasing their box scores on Google Drive.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
You can get a WordPress, template, go online, just get a WordPress template and release them there.
Or Squarespace is $20 a month.
We love Squarespace. He loves it. Birmingham, Alabama City Council President William Parker announcing he wants to bring one of the 8 newly launched USFL teams to Birmingham, and he plans to meet with league officials in the next few weeks.
This isn't surprising. They're super high on XFL too. Like he had been trying to get an XFL team. He was trying to get him on the relaunch. This guy, this William Parker, I imagine it's the same mayor that was on. Mark interviewed him like a year and a half ago on XFL News Hub, but I imagine it's, the same mayor, but Birmingham is like super high on trying to get an all football team there. And so that would, again, these trademarks are getting picked up by the USFL. Like, I don't know. I think Birmingham's a good market to go to. I think that's kind of left open right now from current football offerings.
Yeah, they did have an AAF team there. The Iron, I believe it was the Birmingham Iron was playing in Birmingham. So it's a market that they should definitely look into. It's a market that, you're gonna make money on that market. You're definitely gonna make money on that market, especially during a time when you don't have Alabama football or Auburn football. I mean, Alabama's the king there, but during that time when you don't have those two things, like you want to watch football, go check out an XFL, CFL, USFL game, whatever it might be. Spring League Blues wide receiver Davian Davis heading to Cleveland for a minicamp with the Browns. Congrats to him.
Yeah, just again, we love seeing all this. They got a couple of Bears too. Salvatore Canella. I've gone back and forth with him. I think he was in the first spring league. Like I've gone back and forth with him forever. He's going to the Chicago's Bears camp, and then TJ Wheatley. Great. I mean, again, we want to see all these signings and everything moving on.
Very cool. Alphas.
Long snapper.
Long snapper. Yep. There you go. Mitch Fraboni signing with Houston, Texas today. That's pretty cool because long snapper is a very, very specific, specialized position. You got to be really good. So congrats to Mitch on that. Sorry, I didn't see the little part for the L. I was like, is that money?
It was really fun. Just a side note. They were talking Cam Newton, with the Panthers. He's got nicknames for like all the team members, right? Like Mac Jones is Mac and Cheese, like that's his name for him. Like he calls him his nickname for their long snapper is like Snapper Man. Like that's his.
That's like Bodie McBoderface. Yeah. Same thing.
But Mitch is going to Houston. I wouldn't want him to go into the Texans right now. I mean, I'm sure he's happy to be involved in the National Football League, but I don't know if I could pick any team I would not be wanting to go to the Texans.
It's a mess. Shea Patterson to the BC Lions, former TSL player.
Huge.
And huge get for the Lions. Hopefully, the spring league keeps him in shape. The spring league has kept him in shape for when this all goes down. I guess they had their best viewership. The spring league had its best viewership of the season. They had 461,000 viewers. That's really good.
With no, and I don't know if we talked about this on the show. Also, Shea was on the Blues last. I think in November. He wasn't on. I don't know what obviously he's signing right now, but so that's off of like his previous stint. I think unless I'm missing something on that. I guess the reason why. I don't know if we talked about this on the show. Fox supposedly is intentionally not promoting the Spring League because they wanted to see what they could draw on their own before making the decision about the USFL stuff. That's kind of the rumors I've heard. That doesn't make sense to me, but what do you think about that?
That doesn't make sense to me. Why wouldn't you want to promote something that you're putting on the air? It's just word of mouth can only do so much.
Yeah. But anyway, Mike's been tracking that all season. But 500,000 viewers, Fox Saturday afternoon for two teams that aren't even associated with cities. I mean, that's the thing too. People forget with the Spring League stuff is, even if the USFL comes back and they do, they're attached with cities, even if they're still doing the hub or whatever, at least you're going to have some city, passion that way, right? Where right now it's, how do you sell that to people? Like, well, come watch the Jousters. I mean, obviously we're fans, but I think that can't be understated how good they're doing with 500,000 people. And they're like not even in cities at all with no, like literally, like think about like all the XFL stuff like I saw in Seattle. I don't know, LA, I can't imagine it was that hot with XFL, but I mean, we had Dragon stuff everywhere. And like, you don't get any of that with the Spring League. Like, how do people even know really it's on except finding it, especially when Fox isn't promoting it? I just think that's interesting.
Definitely. And then a last fan controlled football note, Johnny Manziel, Josh Gordon signed fan control football. Sold for $2,175. Yeah,
they're auctioning off like a bunch of game worn jerseys. Dees just tweeted that they thought there was going to be news this week. I think they're going to announce some big news next week. Supposedly they're eyeing August to kick off, which is so now we've got CFL and then we've got the NFL. I don't know who is playing in. I mean, I guess just leftover spring league guys. I mean, I guess, right? Like who is playing in fan control football if they're launching the kickoff in August?
I don't know. Good question. You would think that anyone that wanted to play football during the month of August would already be either in a camp for the NFL or playing for the CFL. You would think.
But anyway, so they were auctioning off a bunch of stuff this week, some game war jerseys and stuff. But this was the ball that Manziel threw to Josh Gordon. They both signed it. What would it sold for $2,000? What would you pay for that football? I thought that was an interesting question to pose.
I don't know if I'd want that football. No disrespect. It's just like something that like I have very specific. Like I have a Russell Wilson helmet right here that's autographed. I have my Kenny Lofton baseball and my Scott Stevens puck. I have my Martin Brodeur jersey over there. Like there are certain players that I would want to collect things from, and then ones that I'm just like I would never want that. So there's not a price for me.
Not a price anyway. But that, I guess fan controlled stuff coming next week. Look for that. But that August again, I would not besmirch the spring league if I'm fan control football management. Like that is who is going to be in their league. Right. Like if you're a fan of the spring league, like now it's great. Like check out fan control football coming up. Like that is who is going to be playing in that league. So I would not be talking trash about anything if I was, so Rob, right? It's like, I haven't even talked about him in so long. So Rob, I mean, that's just where I'm at with that.
I don't know if they'll take your advice, but hopefully they will. Want to thank all of our guests for joining us this week on the Markcast. A bunch of guests. It's not going to be a 3-hour episode, probably. I don't know. We still have to put the whole thing together, but maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll just be under 3 hours, but it won't be a double episode. So we want to thank everybody for listening. Again, subscribe to us on YouTube, please, and comment on all the videos. Help us out. Also, like we said earlier in the break, log on to manscaped.com, use that code Markcast, get 20% off free shipping. And anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I got some good guests. We're lining up for next week, talking about more single game sports betting stuff. And then I just was talking to Jackson Leonard. He's a former, he played in the spring league before. He's a friend of the show. He's been listening a lot and he's supported us for the last year. And so I thought that would be good just to kind of get his insights following the spring league. So normally I'm not this ahead on like confirming guests, but I just heard back from him today. And also Nick Solsky should be coming on to talk about the C218 stuff. He's a big sports betting guy. So we had to go through all his PR people and all that stuff. So it's good to have media people work with you, Spring League.
Just a note. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.